This is my channel's monthly compendium for the month of April 2024. Enjoy. Case file number 1545, written by Ferry Soir. Jackson, the boy erased from all memory. I want to preface this by saying that I wasn't a child when this happened. When my younger brother was in elementary school, he had a friend named Jackson. He was a cute little boy with brunette hair. I remember every day when my brother came home from school, he'd tell us about how he spent recess hanging out with Jackson and another little boy we'd call Leroy. I remember my parents saying that the name Jackson was super cute, and when they were looking for a place to move, we thought about moving to Jackson, Mississippi, which reminded everyone about his friend. Fast forward to last year. I brought up his friend Jackson, and nobody remembers him. My mom, my brother, my dad, they kept saying that he never had a friend or knew anyone named Jackson. But I explained all of the connections we made with his name. The town we were going to move to was named Jackson, my mom really liking his name, and my brother being in a friend trio with Jackson and Leroy. Still, nobody remembered him. It drives me crazy to this day because I swear he's real. My brother, mom, and dad remember Leroy, but not Jackson. The next time I visit my parents, I will see if I can find my brother's class photos. I don't remember if Jackson was in his class or in another class, and I'm not sure if my brother has an elementary school yearbook, but there has to be an answer out there. Case file number 1546, written by Bob Thomas. Mind-bending moments, cats, cars, and the unseen. Okay, so these two stories take place miles apart, but at almost the exact same time. For reference, I have two older brothers. One of them drives a truck professionally, just a couple of hours from where I live. The second lives at home with my parents and I. Our house has a connected garage with the door leading into the kitchen. We have 3 cats, so anytime we have the big garage door open, we have to be extremely careful not to let one of them outside. One day, while moving a bunch of stuff from our car outside, my brother and I had just come into the house and were standing in the kitchen. 2 of our cats, we'll call A and B, were sitting in the kitchen with us, while our third cat, C, was nowhere to be seen. Well, our mom walks in through the connecting door and starts yelling for us to grab C, because he's about to get out. We ran into the garage and were able to stop B from getting out, but I couldn't find C anywhere. When we come back in to look for him, he's dead asleep in a chair, completely oblivious to anything. I picked him up and he was still stiff from not moving for hours. My mom instantly got freaked out and swears it was him that she saw and even felt him at her feet. The thing is, A and B are both solid black cats, but C is a striped gray cat. There's no mistaking them even at a glance. This by itself was weird, but the news we got just a few hours later made it even stranger. My other brother had been driving his truck when he noticed a little red car beside him and started to come into his lane. He felt the car crash into his left side, so he pulled off to the right and into the back of a dump truck, crashing into the side of the ditch. Well, when the driver of the dump truck pulled him out of his truck to see if he was okay, he said it was fine. But when he asked if the people in the red car were alright, the guy said, "What red car?" It turns out there never was a red car in the first place. My brother swears he saw it and felt it crash into him, and he's not on any kind of drugs. He even passed the test perfectly right after that. This is my first glitch experience I've had. What makes this story really strange is that both members of my family saw and even physically felt events that never actually happened, or at least not in this universe. Case file number 1547, written by I'm Meow, the mysterious ice cream scooper. About 12 years ago, when I lived in Coney Island, New York City, 18 years old, living only with my grandmother, who at the time was away at my aunt's house for a couple days babysitting. On a normal evening when I get home from work, I plop down on the couch and start eating my Chinese food while watching TV. I finished my food and decided I wanted to eat some ice cream for dessert. I go to the kitchen, which is separated from the living room with a wall, so you can't see into the living room from the kitchen or the other way around. I grab what is a classic ice cream scooper with the big rounded end on it and a thick handle. I got the ice cream scooper and the ice cream out of the freezer. I open the ice cream container, which is almost full, as it has only been dug into once before this. While in the middle of me about to dig the scoop into the frozen ice cream, it was hard. The house phone rang. I stopped what I was doing and left the scoop inside the ice cream container, which was almost full, so basically lying on top of the ice cream. I answered the call, and it was someone from my grandmother, in the middle of me saying, "Sorry, she's not here." I heard the ice cream scooper fall on what sounded like the floor. I hang up and walk back to the kitchen, looking down to the ground, in expectation that I would see the scoop on the floor, but nothing. I looked everywhere, literally looking in places that was not physically possible, such as a gap in between the stove and counter, checking by the phone even though I know I heard it in the kitchen fall. But nothing, and definitely not possible due to the large odd shape of the scooper, would not allow it to slip or roll between small spaces. And I knew I heard it fall in the kitchen. I was looking for so long that the ice cream was melting. I eventually gave up and opened the drawer to get a regular spoon. I scooped the ice cream and ate it. To this day, I never saw that ice cream scooper ever again. I don't know what happened that evening. Case file number 1548, written by Fabulous Rich 8974. The day reality rewrote itself before my eyes. Never thought this would happen to me, but here we are, and I had a witness. Today I was bending over cleaning something off the floor with kitchen wipes. I saw that the floor was clean, no more spill, and decided to wipe one more time to make sure it was disinfected. Suddenly, the spill was back, and I was smearing it all over the floor. I jumped back and shouted, "What the hell? Where did that come from?" My son was standing there handing me the wipes and said that the spill on the floor wasn't all clean. I said, "No, it was." I cleaned it and suddenly it was back. I was wiping the clean floor one last time to make sure it was germ-free, and suddenly the spill was back. He said he was watching me the whole time and didn't see me totally clean the floor. But the second that this happened, he was frozen, and then suddenly unfroze. It felt like everything stopped and then started within a small amount of time. So short, we can't perceive it happening. But I did, and I know others here have too. At that moment when I saw the floor was clean and then realized it wasn't, I was there, but it felt like my body was on autopilot, that I had left and came back within a few seconds. I felt off, and I also felt like time slowed down a bit, then quickly sped up. I don't think objects are disappearing and then reappearing. I think something is happening to us. I don't think the spill suddenly disappeared and then reappeared. I think I did. We are leaving and coming back. But when we come back to the same moment in time and space, something is a little different because we are coming back a few seconds earlier than we left. It's like I left after the spill was wiped and came back a few seconds earlier. Where are we going? I don't know. It's happening outside of our perception of time. Either we're all totally crazy and losing it, or having a collective episode of insanity, or something happening to us that we don't understand. Bonus file, written by Overhopeful, the spine-chilling tale of the vanishing dude. This happened a few years back at my college dorm. Roommate and I, both around age 19 probably, were coming back to the dorm after dark. It's one of those buildings where you have to scan your university ID card to get in. Unless someone from the inside lets you in, there's no other way. We walk up to the building and see someone maybe 10 feet ahead of us scan their card and go inside. The key here is that he is just far enough ahead of us to where as soon as he goes inside and the door shuts itself, we are there scanning in our IDs to open the door for ourselves. Once inside the lobby area, there is one elevator on either side. These elevators are maybe just another 10 feet from the entrance door we just walked in. As we walk inside the building, we see the person who went in before us walk inside the elevator, and the door is just shut as we approached it, the same elevator he just got into. I press the button, and to my surprise, the doors open instantly, like instantly. As soon as the doors closed, they were opening again, except this time there was nobody inside. I hesitated, but walked into the elevator and pushed my floor button. The energy between me and my roommate felt tense, and I didn't say anything as I was trying to rationalize what I just saw in my brain. My roommate spoke up first, saying, "Did you just see that guy?" and verified that I wasn't the only one who had seen it. We continued trying to come up with some kind of explanation and came to nothing. Even if the elevator guy only went up one floor, there was nowhere near enough time for the elevator to go up and come back down in time. Again, the doors closed with him inside mere seconds before they reopened after I pushed a button. Never experienced something like this since then. Still spooks me. Bonus file written by Toastmaster X. From my nightmares into reality. I had a recurring dream as a child, right into my teens, of me playing outside with friends. I would always be looking down at something on the ground. Sometimes I'd be playing with toys, when I look up to see 3 strange men burst from some trees or bushes, carrying guns, running towards me and shouting. The colors in this dream were always washed out and everything looked like a sepia browny green, The way the men ran creeped me out, hunched like beasts, but urgently trying to get to me, brandishing guns, sinister, and I instantly wanted to get away. Particularly because the scene would crop up at the end of entirely different dreams unexpectedly. I'd forgotten about the dream, and many years later when I was 29, I was at my brother's house in the country, on a field not far from his house, walking his dog. The field had been plowed, so it was rough underfoot. Other than the dog who had run ahead, I felt totally alone. I spotted something blue and plastic in the plowed earth, which looked like a toy. Funny to find that here, I thought. So I reached down to get it, lost my footing, and fell sideways, banging my head on a tough crop of dirt. I felt dazed, heard the shout of a man's voice, and looked up to see 3 strange men, hunched over and carrying rifles, charging towards me. I couldn't comprehend what I was seeing at first, and not knowing where the dog or my brother was, felt very alone. I shouted at them and clambered backwards, but they kept coming, still hunched over, looking sternly at me. The memories of my dreams came back, and my mind was a wreck dealing with it, terrified. But this time it felt much more real, because it was. The men got to me before I could properly stand, laid their guns down and spoke to me. They were on their way to a hunt, to shoot pheasants, saw me fall and said I didn't get up straight away, so they were running over to help. The odd hunched running was because they were trying to keep their footing on the plowed field. Even the colors matched my dream, because of my knocked head. They must have thought me odd because I didn't really speak back to them, because I was so surprised to see this nightmarish scene return to me more than a decade after I'd last dreamt it. Luckily, they were coming to help me after all. Case file number 1549, written by This Can't Be Thrown Away. A shark was chasing my car. I'm driving home late one night from work at about 1 a.m. I worked in the Alliance area of 35 in Fort Worth, and I lived in Denton. I'm driving down 35, and other than a few 18-wheelers in front of me, I am alone on the road. Anyone who is familiar with this stretch of highway, you know that it is super dark at night. No lights, no exits, just a few miles of road and country until you get to Denton. I'm about to change over from the left lane to the right. I look into my rearview mirror, and there, lit in red by my taillights, is a giant shark, swimming as if it were submerged in water, bearing down on me, jaws open, rows of razor teeth exposed, ready to strike. I screamed and jerked my head around to look out my window. Nothing. It was gone. No one behind me, no cars, no trucks, certainly no giant sharks. As if nothing just happened at all, I pulled over, shaking and sweating. It had all taken place in a fraction of a second, and I had no idea how to process what I had just seen. There was a shark in my rearview mirror that was inches away from ripping the crap out of the back of my car. The image still plays in my mind over and over. I'm not crazy. I have no history of mental illness, neither does anyone in my family. I had not, at that time, ever partaken in hallucinogens. I'd never, and since then, still have never had any kind of hallucination like that. Anyone that I have ever told thinks I'm either lying or nuts, and I kinda hope I am. But I saw that shark, and it saw me, and it wanted my blood. Case file number 1550, written by I. Dade Marshall. 4 friends' eerie encounter with a time warp. I was driving back to college from spring break with 3 other friends. We were all from the same hometown, and our university was roughly 4 hours away. As a precursor, none of us took drugs of any sort, and we were all on various sports teams with full rides for academics. We were the kids whose parents let them drive the Escalade or Range Rover back to college, and everything always went our way. Your typical Ivy Leaguer. Not always proud of this, but it's just to validate that we weren't your typical alien abductees crazy people. About 3 hours into the drive, we start noticing familiar signs that we saw hours ago. Confused, we just kept driving and ignored it. After about 10 minutes, we knew something was wrong. Since we were seeing all the same signs and landmarks we did 3 hours prior, we never got off the freeway, drove south the whole time, and nobody fell asleep. We drove 3 hours south, then out of nowhere, we were right back near the start. We figured since we left our hometown at noon, we would get to school by 4. We didn't get to school until 7, and never hit any traffic. It was like we went into a time warp or something, and it scared us so much that nobody said a word the rest of the trip. When we got to school, none of us said anything to each other or talked to each other for over a month other than the agreement never to speak about it. Case file number 1551, written by Jayla. The bizarre case of Julia's disappearing pregnancy. One night, I was at a friend's house and a mutual friend of ours came over. Let's call her Julia. Anyway, it became apparent to me as soon as Julia walked in that she was pregnant, and I mean way pregnant. The girl has always been really tiny, and she still was, except for a big round pregnant belly and larger boobs. It couldn't have been just weight gain because she still had skinny arms and a thin face. Basically, it was really obvious that she was preggers, and it couldn't have been anything else. Cue this awkward thing where I'm trying not to stare, wondering if I should congratulate her or show concern, because she's only 17 and not in a stable financial situation to raise a child. She says nothing at all, and neither does the friend whose house we're in. I tell my mother about this in confidence, because I just kinda need to tell someone about this whole awkward thing. A week later, my mother sees Julia at the store, comes back and tells me there's no way she's pregnant. She looks just as tiny all over as usual. Confused, I figured my mom must have seen someone else. So I call up the friend whose house we went to. She also has no idea what I'm talking about, even though she was right there with us on the night that it was so clear Julia was pretty far along. Fast forward to a year later. I haven't heard from Julia in a while, and get on Facebook to find out she's been in the hospital in labor with a child. I get prickles on the back of my neck and go way back on Julia's page until I find a message saying that she's coming over to my friend's house to hang out with us, exactly a year from that day. Case file number 1552, written by Spooky Molly. Lost in the Whispering Void. Well, there I was playing video games in my room with my dog lying next to me, and my boyfriend works on the computer in his office, which is opposite, but at a considerable distance since my house is quite big. I listened to him start having a conversation with a colleague over the headphones. Whenever he concentrates on talking, he starts walking around the house, so I'm not surprised to hear him walking away towards the kitchen. My hallway is long and echoes, and I heard him talking as he crossed it. And once there, he starts moving things in the kitchen. I thought he would want to eat something, as did my dog, who immediately raised his head listening to the noises and ran towards the kitchen. What happened next is that I immediately heard his voice much closer. He has a high-pitched voice, and I even got a little scared. I raised my head and saw him leaving the next room, still focused on the conversation. I thought my ears had deceived me, and that was where he was the whole time. Until I look down the hallway and see my dog arrive, who stares at my boyfriend very puzzled, and turns his head a couple of times towards the kitchen and again to my boyfriend. Would he be so confused that he teleported away without realizing it? Did my dog come to see him in the kitchen? The poor guy seemed really confused. I don't know how to explain to him that sometimes the Matrix fails. Bonus file, written by Moon Fragment. The Tales of Teenage Terror. This happened when we were high school seniors, 17 and 18, and not too long ago, so I remember it well. For context, my brother and I are close in age, so it was common for us to share a friend group. In high school, we had this close friend who would come stay over at our house multiple times a week. The three of us were super close. We would always hang out in my brother's room, which was in the basement, basically encompassing the whole small basement, so there weren't any adjacent rooms. Now onto the incident. We were hanging out in his room after school, maybe 5 p.m. The three of us were sitting on the ground around my brother's coffee table, playing a card game or something, just chilling. Then out of nowhere from the corner of the room came for just a moment this incredibly loud, tortured screaming, as if someone, sounded like a man, was either in incredible pain or incredibly enraged, screaming at the top of their lungs. It sounded as if it were coming from a particular spot in the room. From where I was sitting, I was facing the spot. There was nothing there and no TV on. We weren't listening to music or even speaking loudly. For all intents and purposes, it sounded as if a portal were opened in the room in that spot, where the sound erupted from for just a moment, and then just as suddenly closed. All three of our jaws drop, and no one said anything for a moment, just all looked at each other for a beat. Then we all went, "What the hell was that?" All three of us distinctly heard it and reacted to it. Again, it was extremely loud. It made us stop what we were doing and just freeze in place. My brother went upstairs to check things out. The living room is directly above the basement. My father was watching TV, Game of Thrones I remember specifically, but it was at a normal, if not somewhat low volume, so not loud enough for us to hear downstairs. Sometimes if the TV was really loud in the living room, you could hear it in the basement. But it would sound like you imagine, like muffled TV sounds coming from upstairs. This scream was an isolated sound and specifically sounded like it came from the right corner of the room. so away from the upstairs TV, which would be directly above where we sat, and as if it was level with us, not coming from above. And of course it was loud and clear, not muffled in the least. Also, the scene in question did not match up with the sound or even screaming or shouting at all. If I recall correctly, it was either a dialogue scene or something like that. I think at the time we just laughed it off, but the more I think about it, the more unsettling it is. All three of us still recall it with the same details I presented, so it's not like I made it up or dreamt it. The other occurrences are not as interesting, but involve material evidence. They both occurred around the same time, with the same brother and friend. The first one is maybe more classic glitch. Our friend got a shirt from a fashion expo. It was a printed shirt that could only be found from this brand at this specific place, for the limited time of the expo. Since my friend would stay over so frequently, and we would go to and from school together, it was typical for him to bring a change of clothes, and inevitably leave something behind. So when I found the shirt in my drawer, I didn't think anything of it. I went to return it to said friend, but lo and behold, he already had his shirt. So then there were two shirts. No one else went to this expo. He only received one shirt, and no one else in his family had this shirt. The shirts were identical. Maybe not as interesting, but for some reason this made us flip our lid more than the other occurrence. It became a kind of shirtgate for a long time. The other occurrence I didn't recall until my brother mentioned it yesterday. It is somewhat more sinister than the first. Apparently, once me, my brother, and our friend were hanging out in my brother's room, the same basement room. We went out for a short while, maybe half an hour tops, and when we came back, my brother's glasses were on his bed, perfectly dismantled. They were not broken, crushed, or snapped, as what happens if you accidentally sit on them or crush them. They were neatly taken apart. We have no idea how this could have occurred either. Case file number 1553, written by Government Evening, 815, The Road to Nowhere. So, I go visit my friend who lives in a town about an hour away from me. I go there at least twice a month. Usually we just hang out with her kids, catch up, etc. Regular friend crap. I've been doing this for almost a year since she moved to this town. Sometimes, she sees me when she's in town, we go back and forth, whatever, you get it. I always take the back roads and not I-35, the closest highway. I know the way to and back from her place like the back of my hand. I've driven it so many times. Left out of her apartment, right at the stoplight, go through 2 stop signs left, then 45 minutes on CR 373 until I see the lights from my subdivision. After taking that last left, there's no stop signs on the CR. There is one yield sign. So I'm driving back last night and I hit a stop sign, not thinking much of it. The crossroad is unfamiliar, but I was jamming to music and smoking a cigarette, whatever. Not even 2 minutes later, another stop sign, but this one had no crossroads, just seemingly in the middle of the CR for no reason. A few minutes later, another stop sign, no crossroads, and again, 2 more times. After close to an hour, I was concerned I didn't see the lights from my subdivision, so I checked my GPS. It showed my location as having just left her apartment. I figured I took a wrong turn, so I just backtracked for close to an hour until I saw the Cefco station, where I normally take a left at. I called her and told her what happened. She laughed and said, "You just left like 10 minutes ago, you're crazy." I got creeped out and told her to stay on the phone with me. I drove my normal route home and saw 0 stop signs and arrived within 40 minutes. I know I didn't take a wrong turn. I swear I know that road so well. And the road I had just backtracked on suddenly had no stop signs. It's the same route I travel each and every time. No extra turns. I feel like I'm going crazy and I can't stop thinking about it. Case file number 1554, written by Responsible Table 895, The Backwards Runner on Interstate 95. My husband and I were on a road trip a few years ago. At the time, we preferred to travel at night, less traffic. We were in our early 20s and didn't mind all-nighters when we were on the Interstate Highway 95 heading south. We used to take this drive a few times a year, to the point we do not need a GPS. We were very familiar with it. Anyways, it's the middle of the night in one of the Carolinas. We're not in a big city, so any light in the sky, streetlight, headlight, would be really noticeable. The interstate is fairly empty at this time, roughly 2 a.m. I noticed an overpass and bridge that I don't remember being there. I notice my husband notices it too, because he tilts his head and says, Before I can say that's new or I don't remember that, we notice a man is being illuminated by orange-looking lights, like a row of street lamps close together, while he's running. He has long curly hair and seems to be running at full speed. I mention the hair length because typically, if you're running with hair down, the hair trails behind you. Well, his hair was trailing behind him, but he was running backwards. Not like a backwards run, but like someone pressed a rewind button. His movements, his hair, everything. My husband and I would consider ourselves runners, and his form was what we noticed first. It looked like he ran forward, then someone rewinded it. As we drive under it, I turn around and don't see the bridge anymore, and my husband blurts out, "What the hell was that?" For the remainder of the drive, we tried to rationalize it, but it still freaks us both out. We call it a glitch, but it seemed more like a rewind. Where did the overpass and bridge come from? Where did it go? Where did the lights go? I will add that my husband is very geographically gifted and can remember places very well. A few days later, we are returning home, and you know what still isn't there? The bridge. Case file number 1555, written by Cleaches. The Mystery of the Christmas Stars. For Christmas, my partner gifted me 3 pairs of earrings all in one gift set, one of which was a pair of stars. We stayed at my mother-in-law's house for the holidays, so we were living out of bags and suitcases, and therefore I made sure I kept the earrings in their box on the bedside table so as to not lose them. It was a few days after Christmas that we decided to go on a girls' shopping trip in the nearby town. I chose to wear the star earrings I was gifted, but because I had already worn the other 2 sets, and they were already in my jewelry bag, this was the last set left in the original box. I put them on and left the empty box as a reminder to put all 3 sets back when we returned home. As we are leaving, my mother-in-law compliments my earrings and I jokingly do a pose to show them off. It's a few hours later and I'm in a store's changing room trying on clothes when I noticed I'm only wearing 1 earring. I did not feel it fall out, but I checked the cubicle and retraced my steps around the store in hopes that it may have fallen out recently. My mother-in-law even acknowledges that one is missing once we reunite outside the store, so I know for sure I was wearing them before we left the house. I cut my losses and accept that it's likely it fell out hours ago and it would be impossible to find, so we continue about our day. I leave the lonely earring in as I didn't want to damage it in my purse, but I keep checking it's there every so often. When we return home, I'm sorting through the items I've purchased and going to put away things, when I see the earring box on the bedside table. It has 1 star earring in it, still hooked into the original card with the backing on it. I just froze, thinking I had lost my mind and only put 1 earring in this morning and misremembered, but grateful that I still had a complete set after all. I took the earring to the mirror to put it in, and there I see, I'm not wearing the other one, completely disappeared. I know it was there not even 5 minutes before as I had looked in the car mirror just before I came into the house, but now it's gone. Somehow, I had left the house with 2 earrings in, came home with none, and found 1 still in packaging. Hey you, yes you. Did you know I have a Patreon? Super quick rundown. I have $1 tier you can just support to support me. Appreciate it. $5 a month for horror story narrations, and $10 a month for my uncut reactions to shows I've never seen before. There's a 7-day free trial. Head on over, check it out, see if you like it. Now back to the stories. Case file number 1556, written by Pseudonymist. A Beijing biker mystery. A few months ago, I was at the corner of an intersection in Beijing. A man on an electric bike with a few packages on the back, probably a courier, was crossing the intersection along the zebra stripes towards me. Just then, a small van was rounding the corner in front of me, directly across the path of the biker, who was going too fast to stop. I cringed as I heard the heavy thunk of his bike hitting the side of the van, but at least it didn't sound like he fell over or anything broke. The van stopped for a moment, but then drove off. But the biker was just gone. I had a clear view of every direction he could have ridden off, but he just had disappeared, as if he had been absorbed into the side of the van. Second story. On my wedding night, we were just going to bed when the phone started ringing. I picked it up and suddenly found myself sucked into this other... Not sorry, just kidding. I picked it up and a man on the line asked, "Is this room 14? Is Kay Mitchell there?" "Sorry," I said. "You have the wrong room." I hung up the phone a bit stunned. It was the name of my late grandmother. I never did find out who was in room 14. Bonus file written by Siuk. The Spectral Stroll of Mr. Bentley. Not my story, but a friend of mine. He is an old physics teacher, pretty open-minded. One day in the pub, we were talking about ghosts, and I suggested that a person's energy could be contained in items like big rocks or vehicles if that is where they died. He told me he had 2 ghost stories which he believed were true. I pressed him to tell me, and he told me about Mr. Bentley. When he had been in his early 30s, he lived next door to an undertaker's or chapels of rest. One night, he was having a smoke before bedtime when he happened to look down into the garden of his apartment, which was between his building and the chapel of rest. In the garden, he saw the shape of a man made entirely out of what he described as Christmas tree lights. The shape walked around the garden and suddenly disappeared. A few days later, he was coming back from work and saw the undertaker cleaning his hearse in the yard. He said hello as usual and asked him about the thing he had seen in the garden. The undertaker told him, "That's Mr. Bentley. He came in on Monday." My friend presumed the undertaker meant Mr. Bentley was a new member of staff, but Mr. Bentley wasn't. He was sitting in the chapel of rest, waiting for a distant relative to take care of the arrangements. My friend was shocked and said that he felt as though someone had walked over his grave. The undertaker laughed and told him it wasn't the first time one of his customers had been seen taking a walk in the gardens. He wouldn't tell me his other story. Bonus file, written by the writer Ben, The Mystery of the White Object. One time I was sitting at my computer goofing off when a small white object flew out of nowhere and hit my desk. I picked it up and it appeared to be PVC or something similar and had broken off from something. The object was shaped funny and broken at an odd fracture. I looked everywhere and could not find anything in the entire house that it could have broken off from. In the same room, I would hear my keyboard randomly typing at night. I even left my computer on with a Word document for a few nights as suggested by the woman who is now my girlfriend, but nothing happened those nights. I also have dreamed of several places that I later saw in real life that I had never seen. I still have locations that reoccur in dreams that I wonder if I might just visit someday. I once dreamed that my sister became pregnant and lost the baby. The next day I told my brother about the dream and he became white as a sheet and had a look I'd never seen in him before, for unbeknownst to me, my sister and her husband had recently become pregnant and only to miscarry soon after. My family barely ever talked to me unless there was a reason, and my brother was the first I had talked to since it happened. On the morning of April 19th, 1995, I was just a young child riding on the school bus when I had an extremely strong and persistent feeling that something bad was going to happen. I didn't know what, but the feeling was overwhelming until suddenly it melted away and I said to myself, "It happened." Minutes later, as the regularly scheduled news segment on the radio came on, the DJ announced the breaking news that minutes earlier, an explosion had happened at the Alfred P. Murrah building in Oklahoma City. Yes, the Oklahoma City bombing. Oh, and I had watched and looked at the time. Upon realizing it had happened at 8:02, I lived in the Mountain Time Zone, and the event happened Central. So it would have been an hour ahead, 9:02, the exact time of the bombing. I had similar feelings the morning of 9/11, the Japanese tsunami, and when the morning my family found out that my infant cousin had been murdered the previous night. I have had many strange things happen, but the one I will end with is on Halloween when I was young. I lived way out in the country, and at one point in the night I looked out the glass door and saw the Grim Reaper standing past the yard behind the ditch. This filled me with an extreme fear and I looked away quickly. Then out of curiosity I looked back, moments later, and saw nothing. I recently asked my siblings and cousins if they had done it to trick me, and they all said no, they never did such a thing, that they would have remembered. But that would have been funny to do. Plus, if they did, by nature, they would torment me about it later. Remind me to tell you all about the hermit who died from eating the poison apple. That is a fun one, and took me years to feel safe eating apples from our orchard again. Case file number 1557, written by Just JBC, the VHS tape that defied time. When I was about 4 years old, I used to have this VHS tape of forgotten Merry Melodies, Max Fleischer cartoons circa mid-1930s. Titled Robin Hood. After the first cartoon, featuring 3 squirrel brothers playing a make-believe game of Robin Hood. It was a cheap video cassette, probably came from a dollar store, because it didn't even have the title printed on the label, just a blank field where you could write the title yourself, which I did in my best 4-year-old writing. My parents bought lots of these kinds of tapes, which included old episodes of Popeye, Daffy Duck, etc. But I adored this particular collection for some reason. I remember bringing it to my kindergarten class once to watch on a movie day. Anyway, the years went by and eventually it just sat unwatched on a shelf. Around age 9, I had developed this entrepreneurial streak and decided to sell all my old toys and things at a garage sale so I could invest in cooler things like video games. I think I sold it for $1, which would be kind of a ripoff considering that's probably how much it cost in the first place, then promptly forgot all about it. 7 years later, I was in a Value Village, a chain of thrift stores called Savers in the US, looking through a pair of jeans when suddenly I had a flash of images from these old cartoons in my mind. Naturally, I felt all nostalgic and started wishing I hadn't sold the tape all those years ago. Then it occurred to me that maybe, however incredibly unlikely, the tape might actually be in the store. I got very excited and beelined straight for the books, videos, music section. It felt like a magnet was pulling me straight to a certain place on one of the shelves. Somehow I just knew the video was there. I walked right up to the shelf, reached out, and pulled out the tape. There was no searching involved. I held it in my hands and looked it over. It was the same tape I used to have. I was immediately overjoyed that I would get to see those old cartoons again. But then I remembered the writing on the label. Could it really be possible it was exactly the same tape? I pulled the cassette out of the box and sure enough, there it was. Robin Hood. Spelled out in my terrible 4-year-old handwriting. I was completely dumbstruck. I took it to the cashier in a state of ecstatic shock, tried to explain the story to her, but she said nothing and just looked at me like I was crazy. I don't blame her. They probably get all kinds of weirdos in there. I gladly paid $2 for it. I still have it. Still works. Aside from the aforementioned Robin Hood, full title is actually Robin Hood Makes Good. The other cartoons included on the tape are The Dover Boys of Pimento University, really weird but hilarious Chuck Jones short, The Kids in the Shoe, a spin on the little old lady who lived in a shoe featuring a pretty awesome jazz and swing number at the end, and Somewhere in Dreamland, which is guaranteed to make you bawl unless you have no soul. They can all be found on YouTube. Case file number 1558, written by Smash IV, The Strange Happenings by Black Lake. My girlfriend and I were camping in a cabin on the shore of Black Lake, near the Thousand Islands in August 2010. The lady's cell phone tweaked out a bit, and to investigate the insides, I'd taken a tiny screw out of the back and set it on a small bedside table, but got distracted by the splendor of the outdoors and left things messy. We came back to the cabin later on and found ourselves locked out. The door wouldn't budge, so I went to the bedroom screen window and realized I could force it up enough to wedge my fingers in and unlatch the window. I reached in, picked up the bedside table, and tipped it over onto the bed so I could crawl in. I got in, closed the window, put the table back behind me, and then unlocked the front door. I then remembered that I had taken the cell phone apart and cursed because that tiny screw was on the table I tipped over. That's why you don't leave crap undone. I went back to the bedroom and that stupid microscopic screw was sitting directly on the table where I had originally left it. There's absolutely no way it wouldn't have been flung off the table when the table was tipped over onto the bed. I wasn't gentle. My mind was blown. Late that night, the lady and I decided to throw caution to the wind and take some foolhardy risks. Immediately preceding the initiation of joy, the smoke alarm spontaneously started blaring its horrors directly over our heads, then stopped. It wasn't a fire, it wasn't carbon monoxide. The 9-volt battery tasted very fresh. It totally killed the mood. A friend a couple rooms away didn't get woken up by the smoke alarm, but she did hear a child laughing in the living room of the cabin in the middle of the night later in the week. I don't believe in ghosts. The Matrix definitely glitched up somehow. Case file number 1559, written by Anonymous. The Mystery of Johnny from the Desert. My best friend and I were driving through the desert on a cross-country road trip. We pulled into a rest stop at night. I remember it was the first rest stop after the one near the Truth or Consequences, New Mexico. I got out and began refilling our water bottles. And my friend came along because it was unfamiliar territory. A tall, thin man came walking up to us and asked if we'd mind sharing the water spigot. He looked a little tweaked out, a little nervous, but didn't come across as threatening towards us. He was very open and friendly, introducing himself. It's been years, but I think he gave his name as Johnny. We ended up sitting down and talking for a while. Morgan, my friend, and I broke out some provisions and made a midnight picnic. Johnny asked our story, and we talked about the trip so far. We asked Johnny's story. It started out normally enough. I've been away from home for a long time. Lost my way. working my way back, getting my head right. Then it got a little more weird. His dad was an evil man, a man with the devil inside him. Not the devil himself, he said, that would just be crazy. But a serious dose of evil lived in the heart of Johnny's dad, and that's what Johnny had run away from. It messed him up pretty bad, he said. Living close to an evil like that is almost radioactive. It bleeds off, gets into your hair, your clothes, your skin, and your thoughts. He was ashamed he ran away, he said, but he needed time to build his strength. He spoke to his ancestors in the desert, he said. He had a vision quest, and his path was made clear. Now he was going back to face his father. You can't just hide from the devil forever, you know. So we figured Johnny was a little nuts, but we were on a road trip, and hearing him out seemed like the thing to do. Finally, it was time for us to get back on the road. We were driving on through to Vegas, and Johnny had an appointment to keep. We left him sitting there with a bottle of water and a bag of jerky. Nuts or not, we had it to spare, and he looked like he could use it. He wasn't carrying anything with him but his clothes. We drove to Vegas, then through to California. We spent a week in Modesto, enjoying perfect weather and real mountains. Then drove to Seattle and cut across to Yellowstone. We spent a week camping in the backcountry, then started home. We pull into a rest stop in South Dakota near the Badlands, and I'm stretching my legs when I hear, "Hey, how was Vegas?" And there was Johnny, 2,000 miles and 3 weeks and change later, standing in front of us in broad daylight. Case file number 1560, written by CapJack05. Dreambound Chronicles. I have several stories, but I'll go with the weirdest one. I have a friend who writes fantasy stories. She has a few unpublished novels and probably hundreds of short stories. Before going back to school, I would write fairly occasionally as well, so we would often discuss ideas for stories late at night. One evening, I was talking to her online and she hinted at a story she was writing that had a character based on me as the main villain. That was the only detail she provided before I logged off for the day. I went to bed early that night and had a vivid, detailed dream about being chased by several people in a large tower. I could see every detail on the eclectic mix of people who were after me, down to what they were carrying. There were several events that occurred in the dream that are hardly worth mentioning here, but the people in the dream exchanged dialogue at times, both with me and with each other. In the morning, I got online and told my friend about the vivid dream I had. I didn't get a reply for a while until she told me to check my email. In my inbox was a chapter from her book that she wrote the night before while I was sleeping. It was the one with my character in it, confronting the heroes of the story in this tower. Each detail was the same, with the exception of the dialogue, which was essentially the same, but not verbatim. The odd thing is, I wasn't even weirded out. At the time, it seemed perfectly natural that I would dream about what she was writing while I was asleep. Case file number 1561, written by The Yuri, The Enchanted Wardrobe. I was about 6 or 7, at a birthday party for someone I didn't know well. Being a shy kid, I looked for a place with not too many people and ended up wandering into a bedroom. I sat down on the floor with a comic book. After a few minutes, an old lady came into the bedroom, didn't notice I was there, opened the wardrobe door, went inside and closed the door behind her. I thought that was strange, so I got up and opened the door. The wardrobe was full of ladies' dresses. I closed the door and went back to my place on the floor, trying to figure it out. I had barely sat down. The wardrobe opened and a young lady came out. A young lady that looked a lot like the old lady that had gone in, only young. When she left the bedroom, I went to investigate again. This time, I went into the wardrobe and found a door in the back. I opened it and entered an enchanted land, a young girl's bedroom, but with trays of candy and boxes of brand new toys everywhere. Looking behind me, I noticed a wardrobe exactly like the one I had left in the previous bedroom. Finally, I freaked out and went back the way I'd come. I looked for my mom and told her my story of the magic wardrobe that turned old ladies into young ladies and the fairyland with all the candy and toys. My mom had a laughing fit. As it turns out, these people had purchased 2 houses that shared a wall. They wanted to create a passage between them, but unfortunately that shared wall was between the 2 bedrooms, and there was no convenient place for wardrobes in any of them. The candy and toys were for the birthday party, and the old and young ladies were mother and daughter. So how did the wardrobes get there? And how did they connect 2 rooms through solid wall? Case file number 1562, written by Zoo the Nymph, The Mysterious Manhattan Encounter with Cynthia. In 2007, I was walking down a Manhattan street when an old woman smiled at me and said, "Oh," my full name, "how are you doing?" I had never seen her before. Her demeanor was so calm that it threw me off, and I was unable to ask who she was. She continued, "It's Cynthia from 3H. I hope I'm not ever too loud. Does the noise bother you? I did not live in a building with an apartment 3H. I have never in the past either. In fact, I lived in a brownstone where there was only one unit per floor, no 3H, and I was on the 3rd floor. I did not know any of my neighbors, though there were certainly no old ladies in my whole building. Confused, I just mumbled that I hadn't noticed any noise, and we said goodbye. Is the CIA after me?" Case file number 1563, written by Vic's Not Special. Pause for thoughts. I'm currently at a friend's house. Just a few minutes ago, they were taking their dog out on a walk. They have 2 dogs that they walk one after the other every couple hours. Sometimes when I'm over there, I walk with them, but today I just wasn't really feeling it, to be honest. I come from the northwest and moved down to the southwest 8 months ago, and I still haven't adjusted to the heat, so to me even a walk around the block in the spring is super hot. So this time I stayed inside. The dogs are named Bruce and Ozzy, just for some quick context. Anyways, we're at his house alone, his parents are working, and his older brother is out with friends, and my friend Ron had just gotten back from walking Ozzy a little over half an hour ago. Then he came back and switched out, taking the leash off of Ozzy and putting it on Bruce before leaving the house and taking out Bruce. Ozzy came into Ron's room, where I was and still am, and just laid on the bed. Almost 10 minutes after Ron had left with Bruce, I heard some shuffling noises from Ron's brother's room and thought nothing of it, because he also has a cat. But a few moments later, I hear the door to his brother's bedroom creak open, and the sounds of footsteps, and out of his brother's bedroom and into the hallway, right in front of Ron's room, comes Bruce. It took me a moment to really register what I saw, but when I did, I just sort of looked at the dog. He just stood right in front of the room, wagging his tail a little like he normally would. Ozzy, who was still on the bed with me, immediately perked up and hopped off the bed, sniffing Bruce for a moment before returning to the bed and whining, sort of looking back and forth between me and the other dog. Not once have I heard Ozzy make noise, other than the first time I came over to my friend's house where he barked a little bit and that was it. So hearing him just suddenly start whining brought me an uncanny feeling. I literally just sat and stared. After a moment, Bruce left from out in front of the bedroom door, ate food from the dog bowl, drank some water, and just did all the normal dog things. That's the best way I can explain it. I was so confused, and after like a minute of my staring, I finally looked away just thinking, what the hell? Before getting up and walking over to the dog. He was literally right there. I petted him and he licked my hand and arms as I did so. Then he retreated back into Ron's brother's bedroom, and as soon as he disappeared around the corner, Ron opened the door and walked inside with Bruce. And I was just standing in the corner. I didn't say anything at all about it to him, but I swear to God, either I'm hella hallucinating because I could literally feel the wet spots on my hand and arm from where Bruce licked me just a moment prior after Ron walked in, or this is a serious glitch. Anyways, I haven't said anything about it to him, but it's honestly the most freaky crap I've ever experienced, and I have genuinely no explanation. I'm completely sober, I haven't touched drugs or alcohol ever in my life. I'm not even remotely tired, and I even feel like I know I wasn't just imagining things, since not only me, but also Ozzy made physical contact with the duplicate dog. Power in my town went out all day from the moment I woke up, and so did the service, which sucks. So this is an update at night. I got back from Mexico last night and passed out. I just drove over to Ron since I couldn't text him to ask if I could come over, but I promised I'd come see him when I was back. We hung out for a little while, and went on a walk through the flood wash by my house. That's when I told him what I experienced. It went essentially how I expected. He didn't believe me. He thought I was just making stuff up at first. When I told him I was serious, he just went quiet. For a little. Then brushed it off and said something like, "Yeah, sure," very sarcastically. I didn't bring it up again. I'm not really upset that he didn't believe me because I know it happened. And I know I'm not lying. In fact, I'm actually sort of glad he just thought I was being weird and making up crap, because to me, that's better than him thinking I'm crazy or something. It's nice to know some people believe me. There are a lot of stories similar to mine, so I know that stuff like this does in fact happen, and it helps me find something to relate to, even if this is really the only glitch I've ever experienced. Case file number 1564, written by Dark Snow, Black-Eyed Visitors at Dusk. I am hesitant to even write this because words on paper make it seem real and I don't want it to be real. But it was, at least I believe it was. Many years ago, when I was a senior in high school, I was at home by myself, as both my parents were teachers and it was a parents' night. I was in the kitchen, fixing myself a bite. It was about dusk, when I heard a knock at the front door. Now, this in of itself was odd, as this was a small town, and pretty much anyone who comes to our house knows to come to the carport, because the front door was rarely, if ever, used. I went to the door and opened it, leaving the glass storm door shut. Outside on my front porch stood two kids, a boy and a girl. For a second, I thought maybe someone had gotten their wires crossed and brought their kids to the teacher's house for parents' night, but that would be really strange. So I discounted the idea. I asked them, "Can I help you?" Then thinking that maybe they were selling candy bars or magazines or Girl Scout cookies or popcorn or any of the zillion billion things that kids come around shilling, the little girl said, "Can we come in? We need to use your phone." Now bear in mind, this was a small town, and at the time it would have been no big deal to let someone in, even a stranger, use the phone, particularly a child. I happened to have the cordless phone in my pocket, so I offered it to them, and the girl looked at me and said, "No, we need to come inside." I was about to let them when all of a sudden I got hit with the most incredible sick horror feeling in the pit of my stomach. All the hair raised on the back of my neck, and I had a total fight or flight response that I have no reasonable explanation for. I am always inclined to listen to these responses, but my hand was going to the door to open it anyway, and it was like I couldn't stop myself, despite the cold, sweaty palm terror I was stricken with. In the last second, I turned my hand from its path towards the latch, hit the light switch with my hand instead, and turned the porch light on. The porch light lit these kids up, and I swear, they had the blackest eyes I'd ever seen. Like they were wearing those black full sclera contact lenses. I let out a squeak and slammed the door shut, locked it behind me. The knocking started again almost immediately. I ran and locked all the other doors in the house, and ran and hid in the dining room with my dog, who was growling like I'd never heard her growl before. Finally, the knocking stopped, and when it did, the feeling of terror lifted, and the dog calmed down. When my parents got home, I told them about it, but they thought I must have been sleeping and had a nightmare. I did my best to put it out of my head and went on with my life. I had myself half convinced that it was a dream, or something I'd imagined, despite the fact that I am not the kind of person who does that sort of thing. I am calm and rational, and meet tales like these with questions and skepticism. So some sort of terror-driven paranoia, home alone imagining, was right out. It's also worth mentioning that I am completely sober and chemical-free at the time. A couple years ago, I heard someone talking about Becks, or black-eyed kids, and all the old memories came flooding back. I did some internet research and found that so many people have had similar experiences to mine, almost down to the letter. And the cold feeling of horror, terror, fear these kids emanate. I never open the door to anyone anymore without checking the peep, which is a safe thing to do anyways. I am sitting here at work in a full room of people, and when I think about this and those kids and their eyes, I get cold chills that won't quit, because someday I'm afraid I'll meet them again and I won't be able to stop myself from letting them in. Case file number 1565, written by Lingering Darkness. The Forgotten Espresso Machine. I was looking through old photos on my phone the other day. I noticed in one photo of a place I lived in around 8 years ago, there is an espresso coffee machine on the kitchen counter. Why is this odd? I have absolutely no recollection of ever owning a coffee machine. Everything else in the photo I remember owning, but not that machine. I literally have no memory of ever having a coffee machine. In the photo I can see my French press I always used until I did buy an espresso machine 2 years later. Why would I use a French press if I had an espresso machine? Indeed, why would I buy an espresso machine 2 years later if I already had one? And the one I bought, which I still have, looks nothing like the one in the photo. So I'm not simply mistaken as to when I bought it. I asked a couple mates who used to drop in for a cup and chat at the place I lived in 8 years ago, and neither of them can remember me having a coffee machine. Whenever they popped over, they remember me either offering them a French press coffee or a cup of tea. I drink a lot of coffee, so this is not something I would simply forget owning. I have a photo of an item no one, including myself, has any memory of me ever owning. I have no memory of me buying it, using it, taking it with me when I moved to another town, or disposing of it. I only remember using a French press until I bought a coffee machine 6 years ago. What's going on here? Case file number 1566, written by Thrax Emmer, The Mysterious Journey of the Wandering Cards. I like playing cards and tarot cards. I just happen upon them individually. I'll walk down the street and bam, I'll spot a card. I've not lived in areas that have a heavy gambling presence either. I started holding onto them a few years back, and now I have over 2 decks worth of cards. Somewhat more strange. Understand that I don't talk much about religion or whatnot. I believe such things should be private, as much as possible. That speaking definitively about what is, or supposed to be, ineffable, is foolish to the highest order. My wife is non-religious. We have a son. Out of nowhere, when our son was 2, he started talking in very specific, articulate terms about his previous life. How he died as an old man, the hat he wore, how he felt about the life he lived. He mentioned that he was happy to be with us and that he felt very lucky. My wife and I were floored. We tried to talk to him more about it, ask him questions, but he couldn't remember. His speech became far more appropriate, less articulate, less focused on abstracts, etc. Within a week, he couldn't even remember telling us what he had initially said. Also, this was during a time when we didn't have TV, so no TV shows to influence this young mind. Stranger still, my paternal grandma was in her 90s. She was doing less well and was, unfortunately, living in a nursing home. It was a nice facility, at least. I was working crunch hours all the time, and I hadn't had an opportunity to visit for months. I had a dream where I was in a luminous silver fog. I was a point of light in this fog. I saw my grandma, who was also a point of light in the fog. We talked to each other, said our I love yous, and said goodbye. Then, a fantastically bright light shot up between us like a comet. My grandmother said, "Oh, there goes Fred Rogers. He was such a nice man." I woke up suddenly. On the way to work, I heard on the radio that Mr. Rogers, Mr. Fred Rogers, had just died. 2 weeks later, my grandma passed away. I have more stories, as I'm sure we all do. Life is weird, and I love it. Case file number 1567, written by It Goes the Other Way Too, A Chance Encounter with a Pink Sock. Okay, in 2009, I performed a show on a boat at the Edinburgh Festival. It was a pretty stressful show. The cast were there for 10 days, performing 5 shows a day, back-to-back shuffling back and forth between the boat and our flat, with a change of clothes each day so that we could go out straight after the last show. Anyway, one day we're walking from the boat to the flat and I see a pink sock on the pavement. I pick it up, it's pink with a white cupcake on it. It has to be mine. I have this exact same pair of socks with me in Edinburgh. I must have dropped it as it's so close to the boat. The rest of the cast is all grossed out that I'm touching this sock and considering taking it back to the flat. But I'm totally convinced it must be mine. Get back to the flat, and it wasn't. It kinda blew my mind that someone in a small vicinity had the same distinctive socks as me and proceeded to lose one on my path home. Who loses a sock? So I kept the extra sock. Now I have 3. Bonus file, written by Acrobatic Archer 805, The Snowstorm Spectre. Maybe about 10 years ago, I was working as a manager at a smallish restaurant chain. I'd been with the company for a while, but was fairly new at this location. It was in Sturbridge, Massachusetts, USA, which probably doesn't mean anything to most people. But the 2 jobs I'd had prior in that town are a little locally famous for being haunted. I've had my share of ghost sightings and weird stuff. This was different. The building here was 3 floors. Bottom was an antique store and half of the restaurant, then the second floor was all the restaurant. On the 3rd floor was an abandoned ballroom with all glass walls that likely once overlooked a lake behind the property, but a hotel had been built since and blocked the view. Super creepy space, but nobody ever went up there. Might be irrelevant, but that's the property. We had a pretty bad snowstorm this particular day. I'd been shoveling and salting the walkways and went in to start my shift. I'm walking from the kitchen on the 2nd floor and down a couple steps to the dining room area, and something hit me. I squeezed my eyes shut, brought my hands up to my face, and fell back a little and yelled out, "Come on, guys!" At that moment, I thought someone had taken a bucket of rock salt and threw it at me. It felt like thousands of little pieces of something hard, pelted me on my whole body. I was half expecting it to be a prank, but I opened my eyes after a bit, and it was like pulling my shirt to check for salt or something all in my bra, because I felt it literally everywhere. Here's the thing, nothing was there. Once I realized I was fine and not covered in a pile of salt or rocks or whatever, I looked around. And 2 of the waitresses were just staring at me, like stop setting tables wide-eyed, because their perspective was that I just stopped, put my hands up to my face to shield it, fell back, yelled out, "Come on, guys!" and then started pulling my shirt like I was trying to shake something out of it. They saw me react, but nothing that would cause a reaction. I'm not sure exactly what that was or what it could have been. Case file number 1568, written by Insurance Dangerous 79, when night turns to day without warning. Every summer in southern Spain, we celebrate Fiera, which is like an outdoor party, with bars built like boxes with no ceiling. So basically, everybody is around the fairgrounds, drinking and going in and out of the bars to dance, grab some drinks, etc. It was around 3 a.m., completely nighttime, and me and my friend were outside the bars having a smoke. My friend suggested going in to take a drink and see if we stay for a bit in that place, or go looking how the others are looking. Now this is when it becomes incredibly weird. My friend and I go inside the bar, all full with people dancing, and I mean the place is packed with people. We speak with the waiter and order our drinks. We turn around and the place is empty. We turn around again to the waiter and he is also not there. No one is. We go outside all shocked with our fresh drinks in hand. Fresh ice. It was clear that the drink was just made at that moment and not hours ago. We look around and it was freaking daytime. We looked at our phones and it was 8 a.m. Turn around to the bar. It's closed. Workers cleaning the street. No one around. Every bar was closed. Bear in mind that the bars close at 6. So it wouldn't have made sense that it was later than we thought, because the waiters would still have to clean the place before closing. And literally 1 second before all this, the bar was full of people and drinks on the floor. My friend remembers everything in the exact same way I do, and we weren't drunk at all. I'm actually glad I have a witness. Case file number 1569, written by Lucidity Mama, the elusive watermelon. I had groceries delivered from Kroger. On my order is a watermelon and $160 worth of other groceries that aren't even close to being worth $160, but hey, America. Anyway, as I'm taking my bags of groceries from my porch, I see the personal watermelon I'd ordered in one of the bags. I put that bag down in my foyer along with the others and then fish through several of them to determine which items I'm taking to my garage to put in my other fridge and freezer. Again, America. My garage entrance is just off my foyer, thus laying the bags out on the floor there. So I take several items to the other fridge and then bring the remaining bags, a heavy heap because there's gallons of juice and, watermelon, to my kitchen counter. I start emptying the bags and my 12-year-old comes and helps me. As I get down to the last 2, I notice I don't see the watermelon. I ask my 12-year-old, "Hey, where did you put the watermelon?" And she responds, "What watermelon? I didn't see one." Mind you, she never left the kitchen. She's been in there with me the whole time. I then empty the rest of the bags and guess what? No watermelon. I think, okay, so maybe I just left it at the front of the house? Maybe I left it on the porch. Maybe I accidentally took it to the garage and left it there. Nope, no, 9, not there, not anywhere. I never actually touched the watermelon, but I did actually see it. Now it is nowhere to be found. It is quite literally just gone. Where the hell is my watermelon? Case file number 1570, written by Bonita248, the sub that defied reality. I am constantly getting my mind blown. I swear it's exciting to see these things happening in my world. However, it's a bit unsettling because it's hard to really accept the fact that we may actually be living in a simulation. If we were, then I wish my creators or players or whomever would make my games less boring. Anyway, on to the story. Well, I go to the laundromat every 2 weeks, give or take, and as of recently, I switched to a newer, more kid-friendly mat since I take my 2 youngest children with me. This particular laundromat is right next door to a Subway, the sandwich restaurant, not an actual station. Well, I decided Saturday that once I put my clothes to dry, we would head over to the Subway to kill some time and get lunch to take home. I bought 3 subs. 2 of them were 6 inches with plain Italian bread. However, my older daughter only had meat on her 6-inch, and my youngest had all the fixings. I also had one with all the fixings, but mine had a different type of bread and it was a 12-inch. So we get back to the house and decide to go to the neighborhood play area that has benches to sit on and enjoy our lunch. I only bought 3 sandwiches, and I passed them out and we ate. We didn't finish, so I wrapped them up and took them home to put in the refrigerator. Later that day, I grabbed the rest of my 12-inch and finished it off. My youngest daughter got hers out and warmed it up on a plate and ate a little more, then put it back in the refrigerator, still on the plate that she used to warm it up. Fast forward to Sunday. So last night, my older daughter, the one with the sandwich with only meat, went to finish her sub, and this is where the glitch is. She gets the last sub out of the bag and it's a duplicate of my other daughter's sandwich, with all the fixings. Confused, she asked who ate my sandwich. So I think, well, maybe the other daughter got hers by mistake. So she took hers from their plate and unwrapped it, and it was her original one with all the fixings as well. What the hell? Now I know for a fact that neither subs were mine, because like I said, I finished mine the day before, plus it had a different type of bread. I know the older daughter only had meat because we watched them make it at the store, and plus she ate some at the playground. And there's no way she would have eaten it with all that stuff on it, as she hates it. What happened to the other sub? How is there another sub that I never ordered and was never in the bag to begin with? Case file number 1571, written by Shuan Breaker, A Quirky Twist, The Baffling Badminton Incident. When I was 12, my family and I were at my dad's friend's house in Arizona for some form of party. Out back, they had a pool, a badminton court, and a large patio. They were pretty affluent, and was a really nice place with a lot of embedded lighting, which is somewhat important. Anyway, I was playing badminton with someone there for a while, mostly just screwing around and trying to see who could hit the shuttle harder. On one upswing, I caught it with considerable force and launched it nearly vertical. We waited for a sec, but it never came back down. We looked around, and being that there were lots of people, good lighting, and not much shrubbery around, it was odd that no one found it. We gave up looking and went about meandering the party. Fast forward about 45 minutes, and the person I was playing with and I were chilling next to the pool, when there was a sploosh in the water. There was no one in the pool, and no one doing anything odd or throwing anything. We looked in the pool, and there was a shuttle, just chilling. We made sure no one threw it or had seen it since we looked for it the first time. It was pretty bewildering at the time, and I still wonder, where did it go for that span of time? Case file number 1572, written by JFS OCC, The Boy from Dreams in France. When I was younger, me and my family used to go to the south of France for the holidays. My mom and dad had one of those tents that folds out of a cart thingy. During one of the nights sleeping there, I had a weird dream. I saw a boy, a little bit older than me, looking at me with intense fear, and he started howling in a weird way, all the while reaching out towards me. I saw the surroundings clearly as well. Freaky dream. I woke up, told my father, just had a bad dream. Moving to the next day, my dad had a tendency to take me on adventures, long walks enjoying the surrounding countryside that inevitably ended up in a place where you could have lunch, and that day was no different, except my mother went along. Oh yeah, I forgot, I was on a bicycle during my dream, on the back. So because my mother went along, and her constitution wasn't the same as mine or my father's, we took our bikes. We only had space for 2 bikes, I think, because I recall having a bike, but not with me. After a long walk, we got to this hill, and I was tired enough to take the back seat off my mother's bike, when all of a sudden, I recognize where we are, and there is that damn boy looking at me with that intense look, reaching out to me and howling weirdly. His mother rushed out, started talking with my mother. Years later, I learned that the boy was autistic and wasn't allowed to ride bicycles because of the dangers, but really wanted to. He wasn't fearfully reaching out to me, but longingly to the bike. But it had all gone exactly like I dreamt. I know I haven't mixed the order of the dream and the event, because my dad confirmed it for me that I had the dream before we came across the autistic boy. I've had some other weird stuff happen. Not much, but this is my biggest glitch in the Matrix story. Bonus file, written by Gemstar, When Spirits Speak Across Generations. Brief backstory. My grandmother was a teacher. For several years, she taught at the school I went to. This was grade school. She had a coworker, we'll call her Suzanne, who was a fairly new teacher when my grandmother was getting towards retirement age. Many years later, I worked for an American Corps program whose members basically served as teachers' aides in area schools. Turns out Suzanne was still teaching and working at the school where I was placed. This is relevant, I promise. Shortly before I was due to start working there, the principal of the school took me around to introduce me to the teachers. Suzanne remembered me and asked how my grandfather was doing. I guess she still kept in touch with my grandmother occasionally. And at that point, my grandfather was near the end of his life and in hospice care. My grandpa passed away later that week. Weird crap began happening. But that's not the most relevant thing here. It's important to mention that my mom and one of her sisters have this sort of psychic thing going on. Not reading thoughts or anything, but just crap with spirits. I don't know how exactly to describe it because I'm a muggle. Fast forward to a few months later. One morning, an email went out from the principal notifying everyone that Suzanne would be out for a while because her mother had passed away overnight. My grandmother was out of town, and I gave her a call to let her know in case she would want to send a card. A few minutes later, I got a call from my mom asking me what time Suzanne's mom died. I have no idea why she thought I would know that, and I asked why she wanted to know. Turns out that sometime in the wee hours of the morning, my grandpa had come to my mom trying to communicate some sort of message to her that she was supposed to let someone know that someone was with him, that it was a woman, and that she was okay. My mom had been confused since she'd been trying to sleep, so she was trying to tell him to go bother my aunt, who was on the other coast 3 hours behind us and probably still awake. I guess he did, and in the morning, my aunt had called my mom about it. Neither of them knew anyone who'd been sick or dying or anything, so they were mystified. I guess she just talked to my grandma and put enough together to solve the mystery. My mom told me all of this, and I literally fell on the floor wondering what the hell is wrong with my family that this weird crap happens. Had David After Dentist existed at this point? I would have summed it up with an, is this real life? Case file number 1573, written by Alt Zatu, the 25-year psychic bond. This seems silly, but it's our story and deserves to be told. Maybe someone else will understand. My friend and I have some kind of weird psychic connection. I've known him for about 25 years now. We have similar dreams. When we're around each other, we don't really talk much. We know what the other person is thinking most of the time. It's not perfect, and I'm never really sure if I know what he's thinking. It's just a gut feeling. Oh, X is thinking about going to Y restaurant. That kind of thing. Now, normally I would chalk it up to coincidence, or mentioning said restaurant in conversation at some point. But it happens with most things. When my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer, I called him after I called my partner. He already knew. He said it just came to him, and he was waiting for my phone call. Now about our dreams. We both dream about events in the future. Just about every night since I can remember. Normally they're just a snapshot of an event, like reading a paragraph from a book. You know what's going on, but you don't have any context to explain it, and unless someone mentions the date, or there is a calendar around, I don't know when it'll happen. Honestly, I'm waiting for a dream that doesn't happen. I'm hoping one day I just won't know. My friend has these same type of dreams. His usually involve more important events. When we compare our dreams, it's like the next paragraph. It completes the picture. The really frustrating thing is, no matter how much we know, we can't change most things. I've gotten to the point where I can manipulate the events in my dream, and I let them play out so I realize if I'm in that event, I can change it from its original outcome to something more favorable for all involved. Some things I can't change, no matter what events I change in dream. The best I can do so far is change how that one event plays out. I don't know if it changes anything else. Normally I have a gut feeling that doing one thing is favorable over another, no rhyme or reason. I wish it were as cool as it sounds. I once tried to see if I could get lottery numbers, but it didn't work. I'm almost 30 now, and I have 2 or 3 of these dreams a night. Some days it feels like I'm living in a fog of déjà vu. When that happens, it doesn't feel like your life. It feels like someone else is controlling everything, and you're just an animal in a larger unseen system. It pretty much sucks, mostly because the events are easily predictable, generally. And how can I prove it to myself that I'm not slowly losing my grip on sanity? I can't prove anything, because I've tried. I want to prove this. I want to show it to the world. I want science to understand what's going on. I'm the kind of person that if I saw Bigfoot or something, I'd kill it so we can study it and prove that this is in fact what I saw. One of my dreams last night wasn't me though. It was someone else in a big city. They were debating getting a soft pretzel or a hot dog as a quick snack. If they chose a hot dog, the superior choice in my book, an old woman will try to cross the road, but a bus running a yellow light will hit her, clip her. She'll fall down and die. A little kid on the bus will see this, and it'll mess him up. If they choose a soft pretzel, they'll be the one in line to cross before the old woman, and she won't be able to cross until everyone else crosses. The man will see the bus and see it's going too fast to stop, so he won't cross and indirectly save the woman's life. The boy won't see anything traumatic and he'll be fine. For some reason the boy is important. I think it's because he has a high capacity for violence. Really, I don't know. See how vague that is? What city was it? It was either in the US or Western Europe. That's pretty much all I know. No dates, no time frame. Despite being as specific as I'm able, it's still not clear. Why wasn't it me? Am I supposed to tell the story to other people? Is my role just to write the story here, and the person it's supposed to affect will see it and remember it? How can I be certain it was a dream of future events and not just a regular old dream? It's frustrating. Very frustrating. Case file number 1574, written by Skip Earth, the voice that controls Tony. I have a part-time job that entails me walking around a small town all day. I have the ability to slack off, and I do so. So every morning, I get a coffee and bring it to an old man that runs a small local specialty shop. I sit in his shop and we chat for about an hour a day. I know his tiny 400 square foot store well, his radio, what's in the store, etc. Today, while JQ10's sitting there, he looked a little off. I don't know how to explain it, but he looked like he didn't feel well. I even asked him and he said he was fine. He wears the same shirt every day to do his work. It's like an apron to him. That also wasn't on him today at first. As we are sitting there, I hear a loud and clear PA system say something and cut off suddenly. Almost like a voice out of the air, like a voice from nowhere, but with the static of a PA system. Clear as day from within the store. I asked Tony, the shop owner, and he didn't hear it, but immediately after it, he changed into his work shirt and started acting normal. It was almost like a movie and someone told him to get into character and then he was regular. I couldn't make out what the voice said, but I was weirded out by this. Case file number 1575, written by Magical Bunny, Secrets of the Heart. So, I recently started watching Twin Peaks, as in the past few days. I'm an ex-film student and this was always recommended to me by lecturers and friends who love film, and I thought I'd finally give it a go. It's pretty good, but I digress. So spoiler alert, there is a heart necklace that's significant in the show, like the one where you keep half and give half to a friend or loved one. Anyway, I've been watching it for the past few days. I live in a house and my room is near my mom's room. I've been watching the show when she called me in to look at progress on a craft project. I went in, discussed it with her, told her it looked good, and went back to my room. Only now there's a half one of those heart necklaces in the walkway to my room. The walkway I just walked out of minutes before. The chain was gold tone with a knot in it. The pendant was mint green enamel with green gems around the edges. 1 or 2 gems were missing and the back of it was a bit tarnished. I picked it up and showed my mom, and we both never saw it before. The words on it were best friends. It was a half with the first halves of the words on. I could only assume that maybe my dogs had found it somewhere and maybe put it there. It seemed the only logical explanation, as we generally never have people over. I then placed it on a shelf in our hallway as I didn't really know what to do with it. The next morning I went to have a look and it's gone. There may be some explanation, but given recent events at my place, I find this really weird. And the timing with the show about a heart necklace just adds another layer of oddity. My best guess is this. There's a rat in the house somewhere, maybe, and maybe it had it in a nest, brought it out and took it back, and the show is just a coincidence. Case file number 1576, written by Pawnzilla Gorilla, Flames in the Rain. My friend and I have a regular habit of driving up to Chicago to various concerts throughout the school year and driving back the same night. The 3-4 hour drive was always fun, but almost every time I would fall asleep on the way back for the last 45 minutes or so. This one night, after watching Japan droids play at Scubas, we drove home through a torrential downpour, the likes I hadn't previously seen. My buddy always gave me crap for never staying up with him the entire way, so I was determined to prove him wrong, and failed in spectacular fashion. I kinda wonder how I fell asleep through the thunder and loud rain constantly pelting the truck, cause it was loud as hell. The last thing I remember was him saying something to the effect of, "I didn't think you'd fall asleep this early." And then I was out like a light. My buddy shouts, "Holy freaking crap dude, wake up and check this out." I jolt awake, it's 4 a.m. We're on the interstate close to home and the rain looks like it's coming down even harder than it previously was. I look ahead and can't believe what I see. In the oncoming lane underneath an overpass to a country road is a completely overturned semi and trailer. Bits of rubber and twisted metal strewn about the asphalt. Broken glass everywhere. How can I see rubber and metal and glass everywhere? Because everything was on fire. In the rainstorm sent by Poseidon himself. And I'm not talking like a little brush fire or a stovetop fire. It looked like someone threw freaking napalm on this 18-wheeler. This thing was engulfed. The flames licked up high into the night and were starting to spread up into the overpass. I couldn't tell if there were people inside, but my heart was in my throat the entire time. My friend and I were speechless and drove on in silence and amazement at what we saw, and didn't really speak of it until a few weeks later. But you know what the kicker was? There was no one else, and I do mean no one there on the interstate, save for me and my friend. No cops, no firemen, no emergency services, no lights or sirens, not even passing pedestrians on our side of the road or the other. Just us speeding past a lonely, flaming heap in the middle of the storm of the summer. What really made this crap real for me was how I couldn't find any news about this on any of the local news channels or newspapers. Google turned up nothing about a semi or trailer fire in my area later than about 2003, and this happened just a few months ago. I told my friends about this fire and no one believed me. Even the guy who saw it with me is starting to have doubt that it actually happened, or that he wants to completely forget about it. When I asked if he heard any news about it a few days after the fact, he said, quite sarcastically, that it was filled with a bunch of Mexican migrant workers that the CIA took out. Obviously, he was being a dick for dick's sake. But the fact that he would gloss over what we saw simultaneously gives me the creeps, and makes me very suspicious. I took a trip the next afternoon back to the spot where we saw it. There was no trace of any accident. I didn't see burn marks from the fire or any pieces of semi. I don't know what to believe anymore. Case file number 1577, written by Involtus Solus. A surreal encounter in sunlight and silence. This happened a long time ago, but is no less freaky. I can remember every detail to this day. My dad used to play in bands by night and watch me by day, while my mom worked. Therefore, he was often tired during the day, so he'd take me to the playground and sleep on the bench while I played. This happened on a perfectly clear, warm, sunny day. My dad took me to the park and passed out as usual. I was about 3 or 4 years old at the time. If you played on an American playground in the late 80s, you'll know this piece of equipment. It's basically a vertical tube shaped like an old telephone handset that's used to climb from one level of the playground gear to another. I remember climbing inside from the bottom, but when I came out of the top, instead of being outdoors, I was inside a small, confined area, about 4 feet square, which was the same plastic material as the playground equipment. I also seem to remember after crawling into it, the way I came in disappeared behind me. The front of this small area then opened into a tranquil house. I remember crawling into a room with beige carpet, blue gingham curtains, dark wooden trim on the walls, and a picture window sitting area window box with a bunch of stuffed animals in it. Sunlight was coming in through the window and I could see the blue sky. I looked to my left and I could see a kitchen, to my right a living room. I looked around and saw an intercom on a wall only a foot off the floor, next to the plastic playground equipment entrance. I crawled over to it and pushed the button. A male voice said something to me, but I can't for the life of me remember what it was. After being there for a few minutes, I was told by the voice on the intercom to crawl back into the playground equipment entrance. When I did, I was able to crawl back down through the tube and back into the playground, where I found my dad still sleeping on the bench. So what the hell was this? This wasn't anything like anything I've ever seen in my life. This wasn't just a couple of small items being displaced. I completely moved to a different location for an unknown reason. My best theory is that I may have passed out inside the tube and had a quick dream. That's what I've always told myself. However, I remember having dreams from back then, and I remember that this didn't seem like a dream at all. There was no sleep. I remember being lucid the entire time. I'm about ready to file it under the I don't know, therefore aliens category, unless anyone has a better theory. Case file number 1578, written by Brings the Dawn, the car that emerged from thin air. Back in college, I was one of the few freshmen with a car, so friends often asked me to drive. This was especially true when it came to end of year and people needed to fly back home. They'd ask me if I could drive them to the airport. I'd say yes. and they'd usually pay for gas or buy me dinner as thanks. So I'm driving one of these friends to the airport via freeway when we get to telling some stories. This friend, we'll call him Josh, was a regular comedian. One of those Jim Carrey types who put his whole body into the gig. This will come into play shortly. We're driving along exchanging stories when it's Josh's turn. He gets into the act, gesturing wildly, when I realize I need to get over to the slow lane so I can take the exit to the airport. I check the rearview mirror and passenger mirror to make sure no one's coming and the coast is clear. There's no cars around us for a good quarter mile in either direction. But I guess I was checking the mirrors too obviously, because Josh decides to stick his head out of the window as a joke. I'm talking everything neck up. Josh looks back down the freeway behind us, sees nothing, and angles his head to look at me, while still out of the window, and says, "You're good to go." So I start merging over and a car slams on the horn as I almost hit them while merging into the slow lane. I veer back into my original lane, a little shaken from how I almost hit a car that I didn't see, and turn my body to look behind me, where the car I almost hit flashes its lights at me a few times, from the slow lane, in what I assumed to be anger. I look back at Josh, who's now rubbing his head from where he hit himself at the top of the door, having banged the side of his head when I swerved. "Where did that car come from?" I asked, confused. I hadn't seen anything in my mirrors and Josh had literally stuck his head out of the window and saw nothing, so there were no blind spots this car could have come from. "I have no idea," Josh said, and I could tell from the confusion on his face that for once, he wasn't kidding. We looked at each other, uncertain what had just happened, and again made to change lanes, this time much more cautiously. I very pointedly looked behind me and explicitly asked Josh to stick his head out the window again, to check whatever the blind spot I had missed, so we didn't, almost, hit that car again. Except, there was no car behind us anymore, nor any cars at all for that matter. There were no cars for a quarter mile in either direction, and we hadn't passed any exits, merges, or other off-ramps. Carefully, I creeped us over the line, to the slow lane, and this time we made it without incident. Josh stared blankly behind us, out the rear window, again seeing nothing, stared at me, and then turned back to stare ahead as we drove the last mile to the airport off-ramp. It really was as if a car had teleported in, blocked our way, and then teleported out. I've never seen anything like it since. Case file number 1579, written by Bacon Happen is The Vanishing Dumpster Divers. So this happened on the afternoon of March 13th, 2024. I woke up super late, not feeling well, and was running late to a meeting. Frazzled, I hurried out the door into the parking lot towards my car. I have to park a little ways down from my unit as there's limited parking. As I was walking to the car, I could see two people at the dumpster across the lot, about 15 yards from my parked car. They were dumpster diving, which is pretty common in my area and honestly doesn't bug me as long as they put the trash they don't take back in the dumpster. I hate litter bugs. Anyway, they looked like they had just got there, with one in the dumpster handing things out to the other one, who was fluffing out an empty plastic bag to store their newly found treasures. I watched them out of curiosity as I rounded the front corner of my car to get to the driver's side door. While stepping off the curb, my Crocs slipped on some mud, causing me to fall back. I grabbed the side of my car and was able to get my feet back under me. When I regained my composure, I looked back to the dumpster, half expecting to see at least one of them giggling at me for being so clumsy, and there was no one. The dumpster was closed and there was no one else in the lot. The exit to the lot is about 100 yards from the dumpster, so there's no way the one in the dumpster could have gotten out and closed it without me hearing. It slams loudly, let alone taking off out of sight in the 2 seconds I slipped and caught myself. I honestly began to question whether or not I had seen anyone at all, but I distinctly remember seeing them, with the one in the open dumpster rummaging and the other fluffing up the trash bag. And if there was no one else, I would have seen the mud and avoided slipping as I, being clumsy, tend to watch my footing, especially in places where I know there will be mud. So then there had to have been people there I was distracted with originally. Did I slip, hit my head, and die in another universe and get transported to this universe where there weren't dumpster divers? I don't know, but I had to sit in my car for a few minutes to convince myself I wasn't losing it. So far, the lack of dumpster divers seems to be the only difference, but I'll let you know if that changes. I talked to my fiancé about the event, and he is convinced the dumpster divers were guardian angels that helped me when I fell, as I'm clumsy and more than likely should have hurt myself. Whether it was a glitch or a guardian angel thing, I'm glad I didn't die. Case file number 1580, written by Austin Mermaid, The Gem Anomaly. I've heard people jokingly comment, it must be a glitch in the Matrix. I always thought it was just a reference from the Matrix movie, until a few weeks ago when one happened to me. I hope I can explain this clearly. It involves some back and forth between a couple of lockers at my gym. It's a little confusing. There's a bank of small square lockers near the front door that can be used for a jacket or purse, instead of going to the locker room and locking everything in a full-size locker. It's convenient, so when it's cold out, I'll occasionally use it for my jacket and car keys. You set your own 4-digit combination, so you don't need to bring your own lock. There have been a few times when I locked my stuff up and forgot which one I used. It's a little embarrassing, because then you have to go to get someone who works there, that has a key, to help you figure out where your stuff is. On the day this happened, I told myself that I wasn't going to forget which locker I used. So I picked the one on the very top right corner. Let's call it locker number 6. It was locked, so I decided to use the one directly below it. Let's call that one locker number 12. I put my jacket and keys in 12, locked it up, and went to work out. After my workout, I came back, put my combination in number 12, opened the door, and what the hell? Someone else's stuff was in that locker that I had just unlocked with my own combination. It was a pink hoodie. I had worn a black fleece jacket, and of course, my keys were not in there either. I thought, okay, there's a slim chance that somebody else had chosen the exact same combination that I had chosen that day. Maybe I really did get number 6 and my stuff is really in there and I'm losing it? I don't know. So I tried it, using my combination, and I couldn't open it. Baffled, I went and got somebody from the front desk and told her what happened. She couldn't explain how someone else's stuff got into my locker, number 12, that I had just unlocked with my combination. She looked at me like I was a weirdo and said she would try and unlock the other ones around it to help me find my stuff. I told her to try number 6 because that's the one I was going to use originally, but wasn't able to open it with my combination. She used the key to open it, and there was my jacket and keys. I can usually come up with some kind of logical explanation, even if it's far-fetched, when weird things happen. I'm completely stumped on this one. Case file number 1581, written by Neon Gypsy, frozen time in a mysterious carnival. It was summer 2019, and I was with an ex who had 3 daughters. We decided to take them to a local fair, and it was one of the last nights, so I was packed. He had taken his oldest with him to go on a ride that the 2 little ones couldn't get on. I had gotten them tickets, and we walked around going on different rides for 3 or 4-year-olds. I had one on each side of me, and they were holding my hand. We had to walk around the fair to get to the one ride they wanted to go on again. When time seemed to slow down, it was probably only a few seconds, but it felt like a whole eternity. I remember all of a sudden, everything got real slow. There was no noise at all. I couldn't hear talking, the rides, nothing but my own heart, and everyone that I passed was staring at me. It's hard to explain, but all of a sudden, every single person I passed while walking suddenly just stared at me with a look of horror. I remember it feeling like they were all actors, and for that brief moment, they were scared. I realized what was going on. I can't explain it properly, but I remember it felt like they knew me in some way. It wasn't just 1 or 2 people who were staring at me. It was every single person we passed stopped what they were doing and gawked at me, as if I was the center of everyone's attention. I remember it felt like things were coming to a head, and then all of a sudden sound returned. People went back to being normal and time sped back up. I never have forgotten this and just was thinking about it this morning, wondering if anyone else ever experienced anything like this. I was not under the influence of anything. This is one of the many strange experiences I've had in my lifetime. Case file number 1582, written by Para Throwaway, From Music into Her Necklace. I love reading stories about objects that mysteriously disappear and reappear. Then it happened to me. One weekend in February 2023, my daughter purchased a necklace that she fell in love with while we vacationed in Eureka Springs, Arkansas. The next week, she called me one day in a panic while I was at work because she lost the pendant while she was getting ready in her bathroom. Her bathroom is very, very small and the floor is marble tile. She said that when she was putting on her necklace, the pendant dropped and she heard it hit the tile. She searched and searched but couldn't find it. I rolled my eyes thinking this was just her not looking hard enough. I got home and searched the tiny bathroom. I got on my hands and knees and looked under the cabinets and in any gaps in the baseboards. I finally had to give up. It wasn't there. Later that summer, we had an awesome but exhausting time at Lollapalooza. After the last day, we got up early and drove 8 hours to return home. For some reason, my daughter had an urge to clean her room, which has never happened. At the time, we had a lady who would clean our home weekly. Well, my daughter noticed that her ceiling fan blades were dusty, so she got up on her bed and reached up to clean them. She screamed, "Mom, guess what? Her necklace pendant was on the ceiling fan blade?" I was shocked. She uses that fan every night. Of course, we put the pendant on the fan and turned it on to see what happened. As expected, the pendant flew off immediately. We have no idea how her pendant disappeared after she dropped it on the bathroom floor and reappeared months later on her ceiling fan. Case file number 1583, written by Rebel Without a Sauce, The Cursed Mirror. So, once when I was about 15 years old, I went down to a room in my parents' house with a book. The room somehow insulated against my half-deaf mother's television and the sounds of the city. The one unusual feature of this room was a mirror, covering most of one of the walls in the room. It was made up of 2-foot sections since it was a very old mirror. It was the middle of the day, but I planned to be reading there for a while, so I walked toward the lamp to turn it on. I was reaching to turn on the lamp when I thought I saw something in the mirror. I looked over and saw my reflection in the mirror, along with that of a tall man, maybe a bit taller than me, but much thinner, standing beside me. Since I had not seen any man in the direction I was reaching into, I looked beside me. I was relieved to find nothing there. I was already thinking, wow, that was weird, must have been some synapses misfiring. Then I looked back in the mirror. The man was still standing there beside me, even though there was nothing next to me. I stared back at him. He was tall, blonde, and wearing a black 3-piece suit with a tie, and his eyes were looking into mine. I stood there for a few moments, just staring, trying to understand what I was seeing. He just stared, not like he was a frozen image, but as if he were just looking curiously at me. So after perhaps 20 seconds of bafflement, I took a step back, turned around, and ran upstairs. I luckily was not alone and my mother was upstairs. I just started yelling in horror and tried to tell her about the man where there was no man. I am generally a calm person, even in danger, so instead of thinking the house was being broken into, she thought I had abruptly gone insane because she had never seen me display such fear or emotion. I could not be coerced to go in that room or even walk past the doorway for a month or two. I just used the side door always to avoid having to go near it. I would even come out of the side door to answer the doorbell. So a while later I went in there to see someone who was visiting. Nothing weird happened, although I kept looking at that large mirror waiting for something to happen. A few weeks later I went into the adjacent room to get something. I glanced over and saw something sitting on the rug in that room with the mirror. It is directly in the center of the room. I walked in and it looked like a piece of a fur coat. There was a falling apart fur coat in a nearby closet, so I picked it up. Dead squirrel? No wounds or apparent reason why it died or how it got in. I was a bit upset because I used to have several pet squirrels when I was younger. I have never had any hallucinations like this that I am aware of. I often wonder how it happened. To this day, many years later, I do not keep mirrors anywhere in the house except the bathroom. Case file number 1584, written by Ruby Red Apple 1. The Delicious Mystery at Tacos El Gordo. Me and my husband are quite in shock after experiencing something really weird yesterday. Background. 1 year ago, March 2023, during our travels to Vegas, we went to a taco spot called Tacos El Gordo. There was a long line, and while in line, the guy in back of us started making conversation. It was a very high-spirited guy with braces that explained he was staying at a hotel nearby and had come the previous night with his wife and kids to get some tacos. They really liked the tacos, so they had come back. He shared that they'd flown in from the PNW. A bit about his job and his wife. His wife and children eventually join him, hang out for a bit in line with him, then head back out to find a seat. These details matter later on in the story. We share a bit about ourselves and do some small talk. We finally get to the front of the line, order our food, and say our goodbyes and nice to meet you. That's it. Never see them again. Totally forgot about this incident. Present day, 1 year later, March 2024, we took a weekend trip to San Diego. We have never been there, so we wanted to check it out. I want to add some context to this day, because I think it's important to note all the things that had to happen and change for the event to have happened. First of all, out of all weekends, it decided to rain down in San Diego this weekend, so we had to readjust our plans. We'd planned to do those trolley hop-on, hop-off rides to the main sightseeing locations in San Diego. Unfortunately, because it was raining so badly, the trolley decided to limit the number of shuttles that passed by, leaving us stranded in the first location we hopped off. We came up with Plan B, which was to make our way to museums in Balboa Park, to wait for the rain to stop, and then head to a few other neighborhoods once we got some clear skies. Once we got through all that, we headed back towards the neighborhood we were staying at, tried out a bar, but weren't really feeling the vibe. Walked for a bit and finally decided to head to where the event occurred. The event. My husband suggested that we should go to a taco spot I'd pinned on Google called Tacos El Gordo. We weren't too hungry, but we might as well taste it because it had great reviews. There's a huge line, and as we're waiting in line we realize that this is actually the same Tacos El Gordo as the one in Las Vegas we'd gone to the year before. Cool, didn't know they had a chain. We started talking about how we'll compare which location was better. There is this couple in front of us, and right in front of them we notice this guy that starts chatting them up. We overheard him making small talk, asking them what they did for a living, etc. I briefly caught a glimpse of this guy and mentioned it to my husband. Hey, doesn't that guy look like the guy we met in Las Vegas last year? That would be funny if it was him, wouldn't it? Then we stared more carefully. He doesn't have the braces anymore, but that definitely looks like him. We remember that he had his wife and kids, so we tell ourselves if we see them, then we know for sure it is him. 1 minute later, we see them. Holy crap, our faces go white and we're stunned. To triple confirm, my husband actually goes up to the guy and asked him, "This might sound weird, but did you happen to go to Las Vegas last year and also went to Tacos El Gordo while there?" The guy confirmed they had been. He said his family flew in for a spring break this year to San Diego. We're walking around and happened to notice that this was the same taco spot they went to in Vegas, so they decided to stop at that moment. He actually did not remember our conversation in Vegas, but he kinda laughed and thought it was also a weird coincidence. We again made some small talk while in line, got our tacos, and went our separate ways. What the hell, this was just not a coincidence. This just doesn't happen ever. What is the probability that we'd both end up in the same city 1 year later at the same restaurant, same weekend, same time, only 2 feet away? Not to mention that our whole day wasn't supposed to go this way. It could have gone completely differently, and yet somehow every single decision we made up to this moment led us to the same spot. We actually weren't even supposed to go to San Diego on this particular weekend. I'd originally booked it for 2 weeks prior, but realized we had plans, so rebooked everything all over again. How does this happen? To the kind stranger we met, see you next year in whatever city we decide to make a plan to in March. Case file number 1585, written by Lucky Landlord. The Ice Cube Beyond the Multiverse. Some background on who I am. Perfectly healthy 26-year-old male. I was fully awake, sober, you call it. What happened step by step? I went to the kitchen, I took a glass for a drink. I poured a Pepsi inside it. Opened the freezer and took an ice cube from there. Put it inside my glass where the Pepsi was. Clearly saw that the ice cube was there in the Pepsi. I swear to God, my mind is clear. I never forget anything. If I put an ice cube there, I know it and remembered it. Then I felt like I had a 1 second blackout, maybe even less. The ice cube had disappeared. I know it's a super small thing, but I knew I put it there. My heart started racing since I was sure it was there. I looked at the ice cubes where I took it from. I used a plastic ice cube box to make them, and it was missing one ice cube, the one I took from it. I searched the whole kitchen, that maybe, just maybe, I didn't put it inside the glass. It was nowhere to be found. I am 100% sure it was there inside the glass. I know it seems like such a small, not important thing. Like, oh, haha, maybe you just didn't put the ice cube there in the first place. But yes, I did. I am sure. Case file number 1586, written by Anonymous, Facing the Unthinkable. Last year, I was dating this really messed up guy. One of the many things that made up his personality was his hatred for all things Christian. I wasn't much of a believer in God myself, so that didn't bother me. One night, we were on the phone really late. I was laying in bed on my side when I got a very strong urge to roll over and look behind me. It felt like someone was standing there. Then I felt really tired, and I didn't remember anything until about an hour later when I woke up to my boyfriend crying. Not only was it strange for him to show any emotion, but he was praying too. I asked him what was going on, and he proceeded to tell me that I had been possessed. Apparently, in that hour when I thought I was asleep, my voice changed. changed. He described it as taunting. He told me I kept teasing him and trying to say hurtful things, talking about myself as if I was someone else and growling. He told me I called him a C word, which happens to be my least favorite word. Then he told me something that literally gave me goosebumps. He said that I said, "I'm going to come see you every night. Does that bother you?" The next day I told my very religious mom, and she insisted I go to someone who knows about these things. A few weeks later, I met with a woman who only made my fears worse. She had me close my eyes and tell her everything that popped in my head. There was a weird process that ended with me seeing whatever was in my room last night. That's when I realized I've seen it ever since I was a little girl. I used to always go to my parents' room in the middle of the night, and it would always be standing in the shower. Also, I saw it in my backyard a few times. After the session with the professional, things just got worse. One night when everyone was asleep, I was going downstairs to get a drink and I saw it. My stairs opened up to my living room, and as I was almost at the last step, I saw it. Not for a split second or out of the corner of my eye. I saw it as clearly as I would see anything else. Probably 30 seconds went by with us staring at each other before I fainted. When I woke up, it was gone. I haven't seen it since, but I think it's seen me. Case file number 1587, written by Mr. Zana, The Day the Woods Came Alive. This one time around 2007, I was about 13 and in 8th grade or 7th. There is a park fairly close to our school, so me and my mates would walk over there after school hours to just chill. We did this until we graduated. My mother was a teacher at the school, so we all had rides home. Well, around the western side of the park were these dense woods. There was a walking trail around the park with a creek that crossed right through the middle, making bridges and into the dense wood-like area. We would look for crawfishes in that creek until one day, we decided that we were going to go find out where the creek ran from. So they decided to follow the creek back into the woods. Well, see, I had a new pair of Converse. I loved them and was not getting them torn up or messed up due to the water, so I stayed behind. I was waiting along the bank while they eventually faded into the woods. I leaned back and was watching the clouds when I heard a rustle from the woods. I thought nothing of it at the time because it was only a subtle sound. As I kept hearing it, I figured it must have been birds in the trees, but I realized it was unusually quiet. No birds were chirping. There was a highway nearby. I figured cars would have been going by, but there was nothing. No wind, birds, or cars, just me, my breathing, and rustling. So I look over to where the rustling was and saw nothing but the green of the trees in the dense area. There was a bush further back that for some reason stood out as it was unnaturally green. Keep in mind, most of this area was only pine trees, so it was fairly dark green. I took a moment to really look at it, and I swear as I was watching, the more I looked, the more I could make out a face and legs. Thinking this was just another one of those cases where you look at something like a cloud or ink plot and can make out faces out of it, I thought nothing of it and leaned back down to relax, because it was peacefully quiet. I couldn't get the thought out of my head though. It became to the point I felt being watched. I leaned over on my side to try and look at it from a different point of view, but still saw the face and hands. This next part freaks me out. In fact, typing this just sends shivers, but I can't help it. The thing stood up, turned around, and walked further back into the woods. I was scared crapless. Afterwards, it felt like the world was on a jump start. Cars started going by, birds started up chirping, and the wind began to pick up a little more. My mates came back and were like, "Dude, there's a rather big pond back there with some brim around it. It was cool." I couldn't say much. I was still stunned. They said they thought I'd seen a ghost. The thing looked just like another piece of scenery until it literally got up and moved. It didn't phase into the trees, it turned around and walked. Just the way it walked back, that rustling sound was more ambient and made a thud whenever it stepped down. Freaking weird. Case file number 1588, written by OK Blueberry, 9149. The Human Loop. Every day, I had the same 40-minute walk from my house to my classes. I left my house at the same time every day and would always cross paths with a gentleman walking his dog. Each morning I would pass through a forested path that eventually opened into a park. Then I would take the roads to my school. Every single day, this man would pass me just as I was exiting the forest that led to the park. And every single day, I would say good morning to him just as he was entering the forest with his dog for what I'm assuming was their morning walk. One morning I was running late. This time, I had crossed paths with the man sooner in my path, inside the forest, just before the exit of the forested path. It made perfect sense to me, because if I had left a few minutes earlier, I would have crossed paths with him after exiting the forest as usual. I said good morning, mentally took a note of how it was funny passing them in the forest for the first time, then exited the forest. Upon exiting the forest, I crossed paths with the same man and his dog at the usual place, and they passed me, entering the forest. Without even thinking, I said good morning, took a few steps, then stopped when I realized that I had just said good morning to this man and his dog a few minutes earlier in the forest. I turned around and watched the man and his dog continue into the forest. I was confused because I remember taking note of how it was interesting that I passed the man and his dog sooner in the forest, and how it completely made sense considering how I had left my house late. There was only one path, and there isn't any way the same man could have logically passed me and reappeared re-entering the forest. It was strange, and at first I didn't even notice because I was so used to seeing him right after exiting the forest. I'm not sure why it happened. This was the first glitch I have experienced, and I was sober. Case file number 1589, written by Appropriate Horror 677, Bedsheet Blues. This happened a couple years ago and it's very silly, but I thought I'd share. I bought some metallic blue nail polish and did my nails as usual. The next day, I was changing my bed sheets and noticed a piece of what I think was dried blue nail polish between the sheets and the mattress. My first thought was that it had chipped, so I checked my nails, but they were perfect. I picked up the little dried piece and compared it with my nails. Not only was it the exact same shade of metallic blue, the shape also matched my right index finger's nail. I find that very weird because I live alone and don't have any other polishes of that color. Honestly, I don't even like blue that much, so I don't have blue objects that could have chipped either, let alone in my room. I just shrugged it off and go about my day. 4 or so days pass, and I'm changing my bedsheets again. While in the same corner where I found the blue chip, the mattress slips from my hand and bends my index finger's nail. It hurts, so I check, and it has caused the blue polish to chip. I immediately remember what happened some days ago and start looking for the piece of polish. I never found it. I'm a skeptic and I'm aware of all the possible explanations, like I had chipped my polish beforehand without noticing, the blue chip I found wasn't polish, etc. But the way everything fits, the shapes, the colors, the place where it happened, it's pretty weird. Case file number 1590, written by Midorai, The Predestined Path to Love. My boyfriend and I have bumped into each other at least twice before actually meeting in 2008. In June 2006, we were both in Frankfurt with our families during the World Cup. Neither of us were there to actually attend, we just happened to be in town. He was in the lobby of his hotel, I was leaving a restaurant. We can both remember a specifically rowdy and drunk bunch of Portuguese men leaving a bar, flags draped around their bodies, and busting out into "Ole, ole, ole, Portugal, Portugal." From my point of view, after the group passed, I noticed a kid with an Apple laptop. They weren't ubiquitous then. Covered in stickers. No eye contact, no meeting. Boyfriend shows me an old album later and the laptop I saw is his. He doesn't remember seeing me. But some other time later, he mentioned in passing that he had weird thoughts about having a girlfriend with purple hair when he was younger. I had purple bangs during the 2006 World Cup. In 2007, we both applied to USC, him from a Northern California school, myself from Tri-State, to the same program in the same college. We both flew to LAX on United, stayed with our then significant others in the LA area, and on Columbus Day, went to USC for an interview with some dean or head of the program. We checked our old school emails, and our tour and interview slots were back to back. But neither of us remember seeing the other. We then returned to LAX at the same time and left from the same terminal on United. We both chose not to go to USC. We met on Facebook. I know. In 2008 and discovered we would be attending the same university in a few months, where we finally met in real life. Case file number 1591, written by Seeker of Truth only, The Hidden Grid of Reality. It all started off when one time I woke up from a very strange lucid dream. I may go into that dream some other time, but I don't know if it's relevant to this post. And when I woke up, I saw a grid around everything in my room for a second. I think it may have been light green in color. I did not have sleep paralysis when I woke up and saw the grid. Another time I had been awake for a while and was just scrolling through Reddit, when I looked up at the white wall of my room and noticed a grid around one area. This grid was dark gray in color. I have seen the dark gray twice while looking at a section in my room. However, I feel like the grid is everywhere, and if you focus hard enough on it, it is visible. I have seen the grid twice in a way where it was not blurry or faded. However, I can see the grid a lot in my day-to-day life. It is usually more faded, so I would have to focus more on it to notice it, but it is there. Even right now I can see it, but it is more faded. If you want, you can try to see it too. It is more obvious in a white wall, in a room that is not super bright. By the way, I don't even meditate to see it. I also do not have any medical or mental conditions that would result in hallucinations. Case file number 1592, written by Agent X Levening. My aunt's unnatural smile. This one is different and still makes me wonder every now and then when I think about it. I was young, maybe 12. I live in a trailer park that at the time was only a circle. My house is inside at about 3 o'clock if you can picture it as a circular clock. I was riding back near my driveway when I saw a familiar car. This car was the same blue car that my aunt drove. I remember hoping it was my aunt because I loved company. Here's where it turns strange. As she is passing, I do see that it was my aunt and she is staring straight on. But as she passes, she turns and makes the creepiest smile I've ever seen. At the time it happened, I thought it was just a funny joke she was playing. She keeps driving though. So I decided to be smart and cut through the middle of the park to the other side of the circle and cut her off to see if she actually is going to be stopping at the house. I can see all her cars until I have to go through one of the neighbors' yards where one of the houses blocks my view. I should have been able to see her pass again, but once I reached the road, she was nowhere to be found. If she did somehow get to the end of the park and turn to the main roads, I would have seen it as she would have had to drive in front of my vision. I walked around the park a few times to see if I could come up with anything, but couldn't figure it out. She claims to have never driven through the park that day, and I'm still creeped out by the smile and how it all seemed to vanish. Case file number 1593, written by Enjoyer of Cheese. That's just evil. The Cart Swap Conundrum. When I was 7 or 8 years old, I went with my dad to the grocery store. It was a giant, for you mid-East Coast people. As I was following my dad around the store, I decided I would hold onto the side of the cart with my hand, close my eyes, and let the cart guide me around the store blind. It seemed like a fun idea at the time, and I'm sure it was a fun idea for a 7-year-old. Anyway, my new game is going well. Dad's pushing the cart around. I'm in step with the cart, grasping its metal cage, carefully going around turns and up and down the aisles, all without opening my eyes. After what seemed like a while of this game, I decided I would open my eyes. I don't know what made me decide to stop playing, but I opened my eyes, looked down at my hand, still firmly grasping the cart, and I realized there wasn't much in the cart itself, which didn't make sense given that we had been in the store a while, and I knew we had walked down multiple aisles. When I turned to look up at my dad pushing my cart, I was shocked. Pushing the cart was an old Indian woman. My dad is a white guy, and what appeared to be her granddaughter. Both were staring at me with confused looks. I was terrified and didn't know what to do. I let go of their cart and walked away as casually as I could, but I'll never forget the look of confusion on their faces. I wandered around the store looking for my dad frantically for several minutes, asking myself how I ended up on another cart when my hand never let go of my dad's cart. All I could think of was my dad passed the cart onto the Indian family as a joke, and they played along. When I finally found my dad, he didn't know what I was talking about. He thought I had wandered off and was frantically looking for me. Case file number 1594, written by Legend ID. A terrifying Icelandic roadside mystery. In May 2009, I was driving with a friend at night. Here in Iceland, exams usually end 10th of May, and people start their summer jobs at the start of June. So we have this 20-day period of just hanging out and doing nothing. We were 18 years old and recently got our driving license. So of course we did not do much more than drive through the night and chat. Often when we did this, and we still do, we drove off the main road and through this country road nearby. It isn't lit, so it's very cozy in a strange kind of way. Reykjanesbrot is the main road. Eliovatsvegur is the country road. It was around 3 a.m. and we were driving there, pitch black. All of a sudden I, driver, see this figure left on the road. My first reaction was to lock the doors. I don't know why. I slowed down the car, and when we got near, we saw that it was a little girl with a hood over her head. looking straight forward and didn't show any reaction to us. I panicked and drove away fast. My friend, who was in the passenger seat, then told me that through the mirror on my side of the car, he saw her smile. We had been driving for maybe a mile when he told me this, and we were scared out of our minds, but decided to take a U-turn and check up on her. We couldn't have been driving more than 2 minutes or so, but when we came back to the place where we saw her, our hearts pounding, she was nowhere to be found. We drove around there for 20 minutes and didn't see anything. She just vanished. We still talk about it. Never been so scared in my life. Case file number 1595, written by Throbalicious. Smiles, surprises, and shifting reality. Honestly, probably the Mandela effect, but I recently moved somewhere new, and not far from me, there's a little convenience store where mostly young adults work. I've been here for 3 months. Anyway, I'm someone that tries to be kind in a proactive way. I make an effort to be courteous, smile at my strangers, and you get the point. Well, there was this teenager who was going through his rock phase. God knows I did. I have a few facial piercings to this day. He had a lip piercing and has an apathetic attitude. He's always moody and can come off rude, doesn't give off ambitious energy. No judgment. Lame job, been there. Well, today I went to buy myself a beer and he's the only cashier, and I notice his lip ring is missing, and he's genuinely smiling. I'm like, hey, you seem in good spirits today? He's like, oh, thank you, sir. And I went, what happened to your lip ring? He's like, what lip ring? I'm like, don't you wear a lip ring? He's like, no, sir, I've never had one. He said it so enthusiastically, my next immediate thought was that this is some glitch in the Matrix crap. Anyways, cheers. Case file number 1596, written by Felix45. Solstice Serendipity. I had a weird dream in January 2010. I fell asleep, but when I started dreaming, I felt as though I was still awake, if that makes any sense at all. I was lying in bed and I looked up at my door. It was dark, but I could see my door was slightly open. And on the other side, from what I could tell, was a giant eye. It was the same color as mine, and it scared me at first. Then I get up out of bed and walk towards it. I try to see what it is, and when I open the door, the scene changes. I now see a girl kneeling on the floor as though she was bowing to a Chinese emperor or something. She is wearing tight sweatpants and a shirt, and has long black hair. Her head is also bent down, so I can't see her face. The room really isn't a room. It is as though she's kneeling on the floor, but I don't see any walls. I remember thinking, is this whom I will marry? I can't see any features about her other than she is skinny and has long black hair. Scene changes again, and I'm talking with someone I can't see. Someone says I'm accused of gluttony and will now pay. I start throwing up a constant stream of what I can only describe as nerds. I see myself as a third party though, as an observer. After a while of constant throw up, I start thinking, why won't it stop? Right after this, I woke up. End of January 2010, I fly to Orlando, Florida to do an internship at Walt Disney World. Fast forward to June 21, summer solstice, and I'm proposing to my fiance at sunrise on Cocoa Beach. I'm now living in Guatemala and will be married December 21, winter solstice, at sunset on the Pacific Ocean. I swear on my life I had no idea until after I posted on Facebook that it was even the summer solstice when I proposed. Hippie friend let me in on that. It just so happened with hotel reservations that December 21st ended up being the best day for all of us. Neither of us have work, works for my family and hers, and the hotel had an opening on that Friday if we rent all the hotel rooms. Everything in this relationship has been one in a million, one after another. I refuse to think it could be anything more than that, but I do think it is all a bit strange. Especially because I didn't plan any of it, but it all just so happened to be this way. There was such a small chance for us to even get to know each other, and for it to get to where I am now. Well, I would never have believed you if you told me in January 2010, that is for sure. Case file number 1597, written by Slick66. The sunglasses coded into reality. I had a pair of sunglasses and they broke, so I sent them in to be replaced. The new one showed up in a standard shipping box with my name on it. I opened the box and inside was a black glasses case. In the case are the glasses with a sticker on the lens, as new glasses have. I put them in my bag. Couple days later I come home, go to my room, and on my dresser I see the black glasses case. I say, that's weird, I thought they were in my bag. I open my bag and the glasses case is in there, with the glasses inside. I say, what the hell? Go open the black case on my dresser, and pull out another set of glasses, sticker on the lens. I take the other glasses in my bag out and compare them. They are the same, both in brand new condition, the one in my bag with no sticker. The only thing I can even think to explain this is that they must have sent me 2 separate shipments, and my roommate of 5 years, who used to be a sheriff, had opened my mail, something he had never done, thrown away the package, then gone into my room, something he had never done, he locks his room, and puts them on my dresser. I never did ask him. I'm not sure I wanted to really hear the answer, because I don't think I could have handled it if he would have said he had no idea what I was talking about. I lost 1 pair of them on a boat one day. I still have the other pair. Case file number 1598, written by Tortured for Now 2. PS3, VHS tape, and a large rat. I can recall a time when a friend of mine just bought a PS3 and we were fiddling around on it. I had just gotten back from Virginia, and while I was there, I had been out on a boat with my family when a submarine cruised by and my stepmom snapped a bunch of pictures of it. So, while looking around on my friend's PS3, I noticed there is one of the pictures of the submarine that my stepmom took, sitting right there in his pictures folder. It was the only picture on the PS3, and it freaked me the hell out. My friend has no idea how it got there. We couldn't think of any plausible explanation. I haven't uploaded any of the pictures to Facebook or anything. They had not been downloaded off the SD card or anything to my knowledge. It was 3 states away, still in my stepmom's camera. My friend thought I was messing with him at first, but then realized I was seriously unsettled. There was another time, around 3 years ago, when I had an apartment with a friend. I can't exactly remember what happened, but it basically went something like this. We had a blank VHS tape or DVD, brand new, still in the wrapping. We popped it in a player, and it somehow had footage of ourselves on it. It was unnerving as hell, and we immediately quit watching it once we realized what was going on. I can't remember what the footage was of. I just know it was a mind twist and we destroyed it, I think, and never spoke of it again. I remember discussing it with a friend, and they didn't really believe me, so I dropped it. It still messes with my head to this day, although I've tried to forget about it completely. It deeply disturbed me. I have a memory from when I was very young, and I've always had it in my head exactly how it happened. I am 100% sure my memory is correct on this, despite the alleged faultiness of memory. I was lying in bed, trying to go to sleep, and a shelf that I had put all my toys on started making noise. I looked over, and it looked like something was trying to climb out from within the pile of toys. I freaked out and hid under the covers, too afraid to watch what was coming out. I screamed. My mom came in and flipped the light on, and I looked and my toys were all over the floor, and nothing else. My mom admonished me for leaving a mess like that, and I was too speechless to try to explain anything. As a child, I had contemplated that maybe a large rat had been hiding under my toys, but I eventually realized that was implausible, as I had placed the toys there when doing a quick cleaning of my room right before I climbed in bed. I am 100% sure it was not a dream. I've always had trouble going to sleep, so it was like a typical night of just laying in bed restless. Another thing that has happened several times, at my grandmother's house a year or 2 ago, I was napping in the guest bedroom and awoke to the sound of a male talking in the parlor. I eventually got up and walked in to see who was visiting my grandmother. The only person in the house, besides me, was my grandmother. I guess I had a strange look on my face because my grandmother asked me if anything was wrong, and I told her I thought I heard someone talking in there. Surprisingly, she said she had also been hearing a male talking too, and didn't think anything of it until I said something. She's a pretty level-headed old lady, not one to get excited over much. She casually mentioned how it's been happening from time to time, but she figured it was a byproduct of her brain aging. I found it pretty unsettling and haven't mentioned it since. Pretty creepy. Case file number 1599, written by Small Monster, The Shaded Death. Last week, I was out in my backyard. I live on about 10 acres, but I was only about 100 feet from my home. I usually go for a short walk every day down the same trail with our dogs. I had walked the same trail every day for the last week. Off to one side of the trail, I noticed a recently dead deer. It wasn't there the day before. Very obviously not there the day before, as I had to stop my dogs from engaging with it. This in itself is not odd. I live in the woods and animals die. It happens. I didn't give it much of a thought. I am an avid hunter, and I can identify the state of decay of animals pretty easily. I should also add that I'm literally a scientist, like my degrees are in biology and medicine. I'm quite pragmatic, and I can usually remain objective. Science explains a lot. Anyways, this was just mildly interesting. I went back the next morning to snap a picture to share with my dad. Overnight, the deer had deteriorated severely. Again, I could explain this mostly. Temperatures were rising, and it had increased from about 38 Fahrenheit to 44 overnight. There are coyotes here, so perhaps that explained it. However, what I could not explain was the fact that a pair of rather expensive, custom sunglasses I had lost 6 years ago were sitting neatly undamaged next to the deer's hindquarters. They are brightly colored. Had these been there the day before, I would have noticed them as they are so obvious. I left them in place, went to get my wife and showed her the deer without mentioning the glasses. She saw the deer, and in a moment, her face went pale when she scanned and saw the glasses. Her response was, "Are you messing with me?" Nope. So we brought my sunglasses home and tried to work it out. Maybe melting snow moved them from the woods? Could I remember having lost them in the woods? No. Snow has been gone for well over a week, and I'm sure I lost my glasses on a fishing trip far from here. It was evening by that time. So the next day on my walk back on the trail with my wife to see if there were any other signs of something that could explain this. Upon arriving at the deer, we noticed something yellow, about the size of a $50, sitting in the exact same spot my glasses had been. Not close to the spot, in the exact spot. It was a crock, shoe, gibbet that my daughter had lost presumably at school. At the latest, this was lost in October 2021, according to my daughter. About 2.5 years ago at the very least. There is no way I would have missed this item. I would have had to touch it when I picked up the glasses. My wife was also a second set of eyes in place that would have seen it. It is also of note that upon this return visit, the formerly freshly dead deer was almost nothing more than a skeleton with some errant hair here and there, as if it had been in place for maybe 6 months. The flesh was almost entirely gone, just some dried strands of tendon here and there. Bottom line is, over the course of 3 days, the deer went from appearing to be dead for maybe 12 hours to a skeleton. A missing pair of sunglasses and a shoe decoration showed up in the exact same spot. Case file number 1600, written by Yomad117, The Light of Glitches. My husband and I have 2 children, and we put them to bed separately at bedtime. The youngest is 1 and won't go to bed if she thinks she's missing out on stuff. So we always turn off all the lights in the house when we bring her to her room for bedtime. Tonight, my husband finished putting our 1-year-old to bed before I finished with our 5-year-old. So when I walked out of her room and into the living room, he was already there. The bright overhead light was on. We don't use this at night, it's too bright. And I asked why he had such a bright light on. He said, "What do you mean you turned it on?" I did not. He told me he heard me come out of our 5-year-old's room and then saw the living room light come on. He saw it light up around the door. He thought I had come out to look for something and went back to her room by the time he came out. I told him I had not left our daughter's room until this moment. He didn't believe me. We talked about it for a second and he wasn't convinced. I wasn't convinced he hadn't absent-mindedly done it either, because I knew it wasn't me. But he insisted he heard me and saw the light come on from the inside of our 1-year-old's room. He even asked our 5-year-old if I had left the room during bedtime, and she said no. We live in a small house, just the 4 of us. We checked everywhere just to be sure no one was lurking, as if an intruder would turn on a random light and disappear again. But there's nothing out of the ordinary. And again, it's a small house. We don't even have a basement or an attic. If it was just a light, I'd be more inclined to think something electrical happened, but he claims to have heard me exit the room and go by just before it turned on. Case also file 1545. Jackson, the boy erased from all memory. Usually when a child goes missing, it's a result of WITSEC, witness protection. At least, that's what I think is happening most of the time. But if it's just a memory though, well, we don't have Men in Black in reality, and they remember Leroy. So it's not a total erasure. It must be a multiverse event, where in this universe, Jackson just didn't exist, or at least your brother never interacted with him. And Jackson never interacted with Leroy, and so you never met him. Going back to check if he was indeed in the school, maybe, because otherwise if he just didn't exist, that would be a grand difference for sure. But if he does exist and your brother just didn't interact with him, that's a more minor level difference that probably just is related to the multiverse. So, welcome to your new universe. Enjoy. Okay, Source file 1546. Mind-bending moments. Cats, cars, and the unseen. It's like a ripple in soul connections. So you have a ripple in any medium, water, air, pressure waves, all that good stuff. But I'm talking about souls. We don't physically see it, and we can't feel it through our physical skin touch or anything like that. But it is a type of sensory input. It's like tugging on a guitar string or any kind of string. It'll vibrate and oscillate, depending on what happens. If it's something that's very traumatic, then the vibration will be very strong. And your subconscious has to use this data and try to interpret it, figure out what the hell, well, something tugged it very hard. What happened? I don't think it's the same as communicating over text. Your subconscious doesn't know exactly what happened, just that something crazy happened to someone you loved and tried to interpret it. But then for your other brother who saw the car, now, was that a figment of the imagination, or was it really there and he switched multiverses? But then the question is, he would have died in the original universe. So did your mom feel the soul transfer in the new universe, the new mom, the one that you always knew, but in this new universe where now you're interacting with your brother, it's pretty confusing, but basically, your older brother jumped from the original universe to the universe that you've always known, and in that universe, your mother felt that soul tether connection as he was transferred in to the new body of your brother, your older brother. If you follow along to that ramble, it kind of makes sense, because when you transfer over, you keep those memories. And similar things happened in this world. The only difference is there was no red car. But that's what initially caused the crash to begin with. But then it makes you wonder, why did he crash in this universe? Did he see what happened to the version of himself in the original universe? And that's what caused, it's almost like a catch-22. Cause and effect is losing coherence. Huh. I have to reset after this one. Okay, Source file 1547. The mysterious ice cream scooper. Damn, that's hard to say. So I guess a ghost or a shadow being, some entity within the casual multiverse realm, trying to penetrate through to this universe to steal ice cream. Honestly, that's the sanest explanation of a glitch that I've ever heard. Even ghosts want ice cream. Now time for the quote of the day. Skiing consists of wearing $3,000 worth of clothes and equipment and driving 200 miles in the snow in order to stand around at a bar and drink. PJ O'Rourke. You know, it's funny, reading this quote, what pops into my mind is the Dumb and Dumber scene where they go to the Alps or something to bring the girl back her briefcase, and they're in this, ski lounge or something and just drinking at the bar. That seems to be what's involved often. Honestly, I would love to go skiing at some point. Have any of you ever gone skiing? Or snowboarding? Maybe snowboarding would be more my style. I don't know. I'd have to try it out. Just in the beginner course, ease into it. Okay, Source file 1548. The day reality rewrote itself before my eyes. So this is an interesting concept of disappearing object phenomena, where I think items really do vanish from the universe. The universe processing centers lose track of the index file or misconstrue it, and then it has to be repaired, and for that moment in time, the object doesn't exist. It can't be reloaded in from memory. So in this case, it was in your cone of vision, and then it just vanished. Maybe for a brief second you looked away, and your kid did too, and then just back like that. Of course, that's a returning object phenomena. But they are one and the same, I believe. Now, sometimes maybe we blip out. Our perception of reality at least can. I wonder if the universe can lose track of us in the same way. When the soul transfer process is initiated or ongoing, having a soul transferred into you, maybe reoccupying or merging with your soul, which may all just be one soul, but it's recombining a part of it, and that process might be jarring, and in some cases causes perception issues and maybe a reset in time too, I don't know. Case notes for the bonus file. The spine-chilling tale of the vanishing dude. So, tethered to the last story, can people lose coherence and the universe loses track of them entirely? Yeah, apparently so, when it comes to elevators especially. It's not often the case in any other event outside of space-time portals, but is that what's happening here? They're in an elevator and then a space-time portal moves them somewhere else? I wonder from their perspective what happens. The only time we had a first-person perspective of someone that was in an elevator and then something went wrong was they exited the elevator and they were on the same floor they were supposed to be, but it wasn't the same universe. Then they went back and they came back to their original universe. So elevators almost seem like a hub to different multiverses. You press a button, you don't even know if you're going to the right universe. Of course, we're reading these stories, but they're from a pool of billions of people. So the odds that something happens to you if you go on an elevator are still astronomically low. But if anything was going to happen to you, an elevator is probably a good place to start if you want to chase after them. Like people that chase after tornadoes. Well, just take a lot of elevator rides and see what happens. Report in if anything does go awry. Case notes for the bonus file. From nightmares into reality. So this is serious evidence of replay theory. That the concept that we've already lived the life we're going to live, and now we're just re-experiencing it as a movie. So we still have the illusion of free will. We still had it initially, but now we're just living the replay. Watching a game you already played, the highlights of a football match or something like that for people into sports. I'm into gaming, so for me it's just, well, you're just watching a replay of the game, and I do that all the time in Overwatch because it's good to learn, and maybe that's why we do it. Maybe we're trying to understand why we made the choices we made. It's the only thing that could fit to explain this if we want to preserve free will, because if we accept that the multiverse exists and there's a quantum foam and every possible thing that can happen happens, then the future, there isn't just one future. There's a gazillion Googleplex futures, almost infinite. So how could your mind know which one the universe you're in now would result in? It's impossible unless there's replay theory. Now time for the quote of the day. Excess on occasion is exhilarating. It prevents moderation from acquiring the deadening effect of a habit. W. Somerset Maugham. You have those videos on YouTube where people engage in 10,000 calorie challenges or something like that, or go to buffets and try to eat as much as they can, and I think on occasion is the key word. That's a good idea. Live life to 120% on some days, or like 1,000% on some days, but then return to baseline. There was a saying, life is like a bowl of oatmeal, where mostly it's bland, but still pretty good, at least oatmeal with some brown sugar in it, right? But then sometimes there's dates in it, or cherries, or blueberries, and those are the exciting days that you really, you want to ham up. But life can't be blueberries every single day. Although, you can binge on blueberries, so you can have quite a few of them. But you have to have a baseline that's just maple oatmeal. Case notes for file 1549. A shark was chasing my car. One of the most peculiar glitch stories I've ever read. Most notable because you have no history of hallucination, nor does your family. No history of mental illness, no alcohol involved, no drugs. It is exceptionally rare to have a hallucination of something so wild only happen once. If it was an aberration of your brain, you'd think it would happen more than just one time. To never have it repeat again makes me think that this really was a glitch in the Matrix. If it was a glitch, what we know about multiverse sight, seeing other universes as they are now in relation to your geographic area and time, it's all happening concurrently, then maybe it's multiverse sight from a multiverse universe that is so far away that in that universe, in the area you're right now, driving on a road, it's actually full of water, maybe the ocean, and a shark is just swimming there? And I mean, yeah, there are universes that are exceptionally different than what we have now. Universes where the planet Earth doesn't even exist, or exists as a molten ball of rock because a meteor crashed into it. Maybe a universe where climate change went truly extreme, and now there's just an ocean of water where you are. Something like that is the only thing I can think of that makes any sense. Case notes of file 1550. 4 friends' eerie encounter with a time warp. Yeah, so this is just a classic mega space-time portal. And they're happening so often now that it's almost, if you go on a long road trip and nothing wonky happens, you don't move around in space and time just a little bit, it's almost like that is the weird part. If it doesn't happen to you, that's strange. If it does, well, that's just another road trip. So enjoy your portals, because they're popping all over the place. But almost always when you're driving, it's still a weird part about that. It's like they're positioned on roads deliberately. Case notes of file 1551. The bizarre case of Julia's disappearing pregnancy. Okay, so you peered ahead in time exactly 1 year. and your subconscious used that information to recreate a scene of how Julia will be later on. It's strange, isn't it, how our subconscious really governs everything. Our conscious reality is fed in through our subconscious. The subconscious is almost like the chef that is cooking up reality for us to experience and enjoy. I guess it's not that strange if you think about how weird our dreams are. Reality is a bit more concrete, but not always. Now time for the joke of the day. Why shouldn't you tell a legume your secrets? They always spill the beans. Yes, they're always going to give your secrets away, so just eat them instead. Pretty good for you, lots of fiber. Caissons file 1552. Lost in the Whispering Void. Quack standard, but this is the pup standard. Imagine how confused your dog was, looking back and forth, almost like out of a cartoon, you know what I mean? Glitches can be comedic, too. Maybe not so much for you, but for everyone else. Caissons of the bonus file. The Tales of Teenage Terror. So yeah, one common theory given for strange noises in old homes are pipes, old pipes that creak and warp and bend because of the metal contracting and they're old, so maybe they're not screwed in correctly, stuff like that. But that would be fairly consistent. You would hear it often, not just a single time. So I don't think it can be that. In short, it would be a recurring event. And then we got a multiverse switcheroo. Of course, you never know from which universe it's coming. It doesn't have to be necessarily adjacent. But I think it's more likely to be, probably easier to travel that distance between those universes. It's just the funny comedic aspect to it because in those universes, the shirt is just gone. The item, I don't believe matter can ever just be created. Well, it takes energy if it does, but in terms of just switching things about, the universes aren't creating or adding new energy to them. So in those cases, stuff is just moving about. And some people are losing stuff all the time and they never get anything back, like yours truly. But the last story is the strangest one. To have an item like that is just morphed from its components, disassembled. But it wasn't DOP. I guess the universe reconstituted its originating parts. Why stop at that point and not go down further to the molecules? But no, it's just like the component pieces in manufacturing. It's very odd. It's like a morphed object phenomenon. Now time for the quote of the day. The only thing that scares me more than space aliens is the idea that there aren't any space aliens. We can't be the best that creation has to offer. I pray we're not all there is. If so, we're in big trouble. Ellen DeGeneres. So I like this quote besides the idea that we aren't the best that creation can offer. Well, yeah, I mean, I hope we're not all there is, but I don't think we're bad. I think we've made great progress, and we're still babies when it comes to the age of the universe. The age of a possible species. We are just infants. We're barely out of diapers, so give it time. We're getting better at lightning speed in the cosmic scale. I think we'll make it. Caissons file 1553. The Road to Nowhere. Just classic space-time portals on roads. And there's an interesting idea I saw postulated in that space-time portals are placed by aliens because they're so specifically placed. They're either placed by some alien entity, extra-dimensional entity, or our own governments. One or the other. I don't believe they can possibly be random. But when you cross into one, you go to their ship first. Then they study you, they study the car, whatever they want to do, and then you're ported back. The memory's wiped in those events, and then you're back here. It seems more of a new phenomenon. Maybe they're doing this instead of going directly to abduction. Aliens would develop technology over time too, just like us, right? It's not like they come here and they're instantly at the max level of the technology tree, like in Civ 6, where they're maxed out. Who knows how far the technology tree goes, and if there even is a limit. So maybe they're just inventing new technology too, and now they have this, so they're using it. It certainly would explain the frequency when driving, and very seldom anywhere else. Caissons file 1554. The Backwards Runner on Interstate 95. So maybe a soul transfer process, causing a glitched out experience? But then the bridge anomaly indicates a multiverse crossover or multiverse site. It's a melding of different glitches coming together, but none fit on their own. And honestly, it's just creepy as hell. Something about backwards running of time, when you are still sane, and especially if you have a witness, you know what's going on is real. Very creepy. And even describing the hair like that. This one sits deeper in me. Case also file 1555. The mystery of the Christmas stars. Honestly, this just feels like some entity is messing with you, a poltergeist of the Christmas cheer. It's like those Instagram reels where the pranks are very wholesome and they just make you doubt yourself. There's one guy who does pranks where, I think it's from an old show, they're very wholesome. They just kind of gaslight you, but then the revelation comes in where like he sprays a taxidermy animal, puts it in a box, and then the animal comes to life. Or there's a slim package and then he opens it on the table and he pulls out a bowling ball or something that could never possibly have fit in there. Stuff like that. Very wholesome, good pranks. Nothing like the TikTok stuff where people go around like harassing others and harassing fast food workers. I hate those. It's now time for the quote of the day. You talk to God, you're religious. God talks to you, you're psychotic. Doris Egan. If God exists or the creator appears before you, but no one else, would you tell anyone else? Because you would kind of seem crazy. Maybe you are, maybe you aren't. It's impossible even for yourself to know. Because reality is being processed by our own mind, our own brains. Now, I fully believe reality is objective. Some people think that everything's just going on in your mind and nothing's real. Well, reality is objective, or at least some form of it is. Maybe it's a simulation, but there is a real reality somewhere. Anyways, not to go too far down that tangent, in some version, but knowing it is very challenging and maybe impossible, at least from our position in the universe right now. If God really does exist and wants to talk to you, maybe there's no way to do it in a way that could be definitively certain for other people as well. So maybe that's why he doesn't, I don't know. Either way, if God talks to you, I mean, I don't think you'd be crazy. I'd be a mixed bag, I guess. I wouldn't know. But it would be interesting to hear. But yeah, a lot of people would just say you're crazy if that happens, so I don't know. Also, it depends on what God says. If God says, hey, good work, bake an apple pie, I don't think people would have too much problem with that. If he says, if he appears and says, start World War III, maybe people would have a problem with that one. So it depends on what he says too. Yeah. Case also file 1556. A Beijing biker mystery. So as a cyclist who loves e-bikes, this is very unsettling, especially unsettling for me. There are distracted people everywhere, and I certainly don't want to fuse into a van if I crash into one, or die. Either would be terrible. I guess it's multiverse sight, but that doesn't explain the fusion of the cyclist into the van. That's just bizarre. Although even, I don't have an explanation for that one, but you got me on the joke of fusing into the phone, but no, it was just your grandma from a different reality. But who is the man? Was it her husband? Case notes for the bonus file. The spectral stroll of Mr. Bentley. Imagine checking into a hotel as a ghost and the receptionist is completely welcoming and yeah, it's just another Tuesday. No big deal. Nice. We should all be so welcoming to ghosts. Friendly ghosts, at least. And I guess they qualify under the Disabilities Act, right? They're kind of disabled. Although they do have some neat powers, so I mean, who's to say? Case notes for the bonus file. The mystery of the white object. So yeah, there's a lot going on in this story, but I wanted to focus on the PVC pipe that just came from nowhere. Because we have returning object phenomena, but again, as specified before, it can come from any universe. So there probably is a universe out there where you have exposed PVC pipe in your room and it just broke off and a piece of it vanished while falling. And voila, now it's just in your universe. It's so simple and so elegant. It's almost like a simple, beautiful equation. Kinetic energy is half mass times velocity squared. It's beautiful in its simplicity. And when something can explain something so beautifully, accurately, well, what's not to love about that? Now, it's just a hypothesis. I wouldn't say this is a theory. Theory is too tested. We still have so much more to go before we get to that point. But still great because it really does fit well so far. And now time for the quote of the day. Learning to love yourself is the greatest love of all. Michael Masser and Linda Creed. Well, along similar lines, they say, you can't love someone else unless you love yourself, and I believe that's true. If you don't love yourself, you literally have no foundation to even stand up on, let alone build a house of love. And I also think people who don't appreciate themselves, they're not as secure, so they'll be more clingy and, not that clingy is wrong, But especially early on, you want to temper it. You want to be sure that you're okay in yourself. So you don't need someone else. It's just a bonus. It's an addition to your life. If you need them to live, to survive, that's dangerous. Caissons file 1557. The VHS tape that defied time. So there was a somewhat recent story similar to this, where there was a book that was seemingly bound to the person that had sold it or lost it, and they were just in a bookstore and they immediately found the book. It was calling to them like a magnetic lure. And my postulate is that when we're attached to an object in proximity to it and think about it a lot and hold it, then part of our soul can infuse into it, not like a Horcrux in Harry Potter or anything evil. I think it's just imbued with our own energy, which is really what our soul is, our energy. And then finding it again is easy because we are connected to it. It's like the One Ring. It calls to us. But again, not evil, just natural. Caissons file 1558. The Strange Happenings by Black Lake. The Initiation of Joy. Nice euphemism. I might borrow this one. So I love when glitches are manifested in the tiniest of objects. You don't need a giant event or a giant object to explain or visualize a glitch. It can be the smallest thing, a tiny screw that had to have fallen but didn't. It's impossible that it didn't. You know it. We all know it. But it didn't. Anomaly. Universe. Faulty. Simple as that. Now time for the joke of the day. A soldier survived mustard gas in battle, and then pepper sprayed by the police. He's now a seasoned veteran. I want to say he probably tastes good, but maybe that's going too far. Caissons file 1559. The Mystery of Johnny from the Desert. So you were acting as inspiration for each other, almost like guardian angels, but maybe more so for Johnny. And then meeting him again later on are pushing into astronomical odds. It just couldn't happen, right? Unless something willed it to happen. Or maybe you were drawn to each other through your own energies intermingling and needing each other. My guess is that little interaction you had gave him the necessary catalyst, the spark, to go on, press on, and face his father, face his demon. And I really hope he did. Caissons file 1560. Dreambound Chronicles. One of the most exciting stories I've ever read. Pure interconnected minds. Minds are advanced biological computers. Computers can easily connect to each other via Wi-Fi, the internet. So why not human brains too? I think we do all the time on the subconscious level. I think the dreamlike state is sort of like that. Sure, we're inside our own subconscious, but I think we're sharing with other minds too. Maybe more in the vicinity of each other, but I don't know if distance really matters all that much. It's more about who our minds have made contact with and connected with, establish that connection. But like with computers, you can close off your ports, and if you close off your ports, your firewall is up. Maybe then you're shut off and you won't experience this. Now, how do you open them, close them? That's a tough one. It's not as simple as going on a computer and pressing a button. Interpreting information, even if all your ports are open, is not simple, even for the subconscious, which is why it makes sense to me that the dialogue interpretation was not verbatim, so you lost something in translation. Caissons file 1561. The Enchanted Wardrobe. Chronicle of Narnia vibes indeed. Fiction so often borrows from reality. Maybe vice versa, but I think definitely both. There's a solid wall, not supposed to be a wardrobe there, and then there was, at least for a moment in time. You didn't mention if you went back to check again. I'm guessing not. Or if you did, it wasn't there anymore. But it's pretty clear that you really did cross into the other room. You described it as it was. And it wasn't a magical fantasy land. It was just the other side of the home, the two homes connected. But it passed through a solid wall. That's not supposed to be able to do that. On the quantum level, sure, particles do that all the time, electrons mostly. Not us in the macro scale, not supposed to happen. Hope you got some candy out of it. Now time for the joke of the day. I was wondering why the ball was getting bigger. Then it hit me. Decent hit. Like the video, subscribe, hit the bell. Oh, and Dave is okay. Caissons file 1562. The Mysterious Manhattan Encounter with Cynthia. I do think that our guardian angels occasionally want to make contact with us, and it makes a certain level of sense if you're charged and tasked with protecting someone. Even just as a normal bodyguard in real life, you do grow a certain attachment to them. That's inevitable, just being in proximity to someone. And I assume it depends on the type of person they're in charge to protect. What if a guardian angel is assigned to someone that is evil? What if Hitler had a guardian angel? That would be wild. How could you perform your duty? It's almost like defense attorneys who have to defend evil people, child murderers and stuff like that. Everyone needs a defense. It's part of the system. And I guess this would apply on the meta level, the higher level. Everyone needs a guardian angel, or maybe not. But if someone is assigned a guardian angel, you have to protect them no matter what. Anyways, that's a tangent just occurred to me. It's very interesting to consider that even evil people might have guardian angels. Or the other option is you just have one of those familiar faces and this older woman thought that she knew you, but she didn't. That's also possible. Mundane, but perfectly reasonable explanation. Not as fun, though. Caisson to file 1563. Pause for thoughts. So this is confirmation that dogs do indeed have souls. At least some of them do. And when they manifest or project out in astral projection, they can constitute matter itself. And you know this because you interacted directly with a dog. You petted it, and it licked you. And you even felt a slobber on your hand after the fact. So that was real matter on your hand, all constituted from a spirit. That or it was a multiverse event. But again, you had the mass on your hand. If it was a different universe, it wouldn't stick to you because you're just there in your soul form, not your real form. Neither fit perfectly, but I guess if I had to choose one, it would be astral projection, just being more powerful than we even know. And now time for the quote of the day. Get your facts first. Then you can distort them as much as you please. Mark Twain. Yeah, sadly, this is how most people operate. It's just a human condition, where you have your presuppositions, your biases, and you build from there, instead of trying to objectively look at the world and see what is true, what is correct, what works. Doing that takes much more effort, and it can be difficult to introspect and self-analyze to determine if you're even doing it properly. We're all so biased, it's very difficult. Not an easy challenge to overcome, but we should all strive to be as impartial and objective as we can be. And if you're biased, at least try to be aware of it. Caisson to file 1564. Black-eyed visitors at dusk. Reports of Becks or black-eyed kids are rather intense and rather extensive. But these reports, most curiously, don't stretch back that far, more like the 1990s where they started to appear. It's a kind of modern myth or legend. But the most notable one was Brian Bethel, who was a journalist. Something I think was in a parking lot in Texas of a movie theater. He was approaching his car and then two kids came around and asked for a ride home. But then he was overcome with this intense fear and foreboding that he couldn't explain because it's just two kids. Of course, then when you see the black eyes, that's almost like looking into the abyss and it's looking back at you. You didn't intend to look there, but you are. So maybe these are just possession events, demons that are possessing kids and guiding them towards a certain event. It's like the vampire mythos where the vampire has to be invited in. I think there is a certain level of truth to that in general, to the cosmic nature of reality, where if you're evil and you're not asking for consent first from the victim, then there will be repercussions for you. But if you ask for consent and they accept you in, you're in the clear, even if you're evil. Something like that. Or the other option is that these are alien possessions, or maybe alien constructed bodies that aren't entirely accurate. It's like the uncanny effect in CGI, where you just know something is quite wrong, but you can't exactly pinpoint it, minus the eyes in this case, which are pure blackness, which is, if they're aliens, they need to get that fixed out, because that's a pretty obvious tell. Caisson to file 1565. The Forgotten Espresso Machine. Hi, new universe. Here, there's an espresso machine. I guess you can't enjoy it because it happened before, but it is a telltale sign that you're in a new universe, in the grand ocean of the multiverse. You found one which had a weird espresso machine. Honestly, if I found concrete evidence of this, like in a picture of something that I know never happened, then I would go full Sherlock Holmes and try to determine all the pieces that aren't quite fitting correctly in this new universe. Of course, that's with my knowledge of the multiverse, which a lot of people don't have, and then they get ported to a new place that's a bit different, and they don't have this basis, the foundation of our knowledge to build on. For us, it'd be more of adventure, I guess you could say. It'd be like those games you played as a kid or a teenager where there are two images and you have to find all the differences between them. Kind of fun, and I guess you could apply that, but to the whole universe. Everything that's different. Maybe if you find all the differences, you get a reward. Probably not, though. Now time for the quote of the day. War is a cowardly escape from the problems of peace. Thomas Mann. Yep, war is simple. Especially, I think, as men, we are geared for battle. We tend to simulate it if we can't have the real thing. In video games or LARPing, going to events where you're pretending to be a warrior and fighting other people, it's in our DNA to be combatants, to be fighters. Not just that, but it is part of us. If we're too cowardly to suppress that part of ourselves and go full on to embrace it in reality, where we might be built for something, but it doesn't mean it's good. War is hell. Truly. And sometimes maybe it's unavoidable, but that doesn't mean it's something that you should embrace. And yeah, oftentimes there's no need for war at all, but people are just not content with peace, because peace is unlimited potential. You don't know what's going to happen. In war, you have a gun, he has a gun, go at it. Or you have a sword, he has a sword, go at it. It's simple. It's raw. But peace is anything but simple. Ironically, peace is total chaos, but in the best way possible. It takes a lot of bravery to embrace it, but I think we'll get there. Case notes for file 1566, The Mysterious Journey of the Wandering Cards. People can have specific attunement to various different kinds of objects. For you as cards, for me it's coins. I tend to find them all over the place, just walking around outside. In the dirt, on the pavement, it's weird. I guess it's not that inexplicable. People, especially these days, tend to not really care about change, but still, it's something that occurs to me. Do you have anything that you're kind of attuned to that you always seem to find in weird spots? But I do agree that it is foolish. Foolish is maybe a strong word, but I guess it applies. To be certain of the reality of the universe. There's so many variables and so many possibilities. What can apply to one theory can apply to another. So, are you absolutely certain of what you think is true for the nature of the universe? I'm not. There's so many possibilities. Of course, I gravitate more towards the simulation theory, but even that is just a stopgap, because then you go to the real universe, and then is that a real universe or another simulation? Or is there a God in that universe, a creator? Or is there no creator, and this is all sort of like a repeating cycle, the big crunch, where the universe expands and contracts again and again for infinity? I don't know. There's things I prefer. I don't know. With all those variables, I think it's fair to just say, I'm not sure. But there are theories I gravitate more towards. I think that's a fair statement. Your child having almost like a save file from their past life embedded in their soul. Isn't that interesting? It really is like loading into a new game. You beat a game in the first run, now you're loading into a second run. How cool is that? That's so cool. And of course, that does tend more towards simulation theory, but who knows? Maybe there's a creator that is just pushing us back into a new life. Maybe we have a choice in that, and we just don't remember. Case file number 1567. A chance encounter with a pink sock. So, the you in a different universe lost her sock, is my guess. It's the simplest explanation. In that universe, she's walking around, suddenly gets back to the flat and realizes she's missing a sock, and it's on the pavement in a different universe. Or it could be an extreme coincidence, for sure. If it was a normal girl just wearing the same kind of sock that you have, and then suddenly somehow lost it on the pavement there, maybe it got wet, maybe it was raining and she took it off there and didn't want it. There's a striking similarity in preferences there. So I think if you found this girl, you'd get along quite well. So be on the lookout for your sock twin. Case notes for the bonus file. The Snowstorm Spectre. So even if spirits can manifest real matter, in this case, that's not the full story, because your coworker saw you, and you saw yourself, and after examination, there was nothing there. So even if a spirit somehow manifested rock salt on you, did it then de-manifest it? De-render it from the universe? Can a spirit do that? That would be next level, for sure. Maybe a creation of your own mind, induced by a spirit. So it wasn't real, but it was all happening in your head. Of course, that can make it seem very real. But regardless, it must have looked absolutely hilarious from your coworkers' perspectives. It's like, wah! At least you didn't go full Alex Jones, ripping your shirt off. Oh my. Now time for the quote of the day. The best years of your life are the ones in which you decide your problems are your own. You don't blame them on your mother, the ecology, or the president. You realize that you control your own destiny. Albert Ellis. By and large true. There are exceptions, of course. You don't control where you're born or if you get an incurable genetic disease or something like that. But I think as a general statement, it applies. And especially the longer out in the time frame you go, the less luck matters and the more your own choices and skill matter. You see this on YouTube. It's the same thing where a single video doesn't really matter and it's mostly luck if it goes really high or not, to an extent. If you're producing something to the quality of Kurzgesagt, the channel that makes these animations of really interesting theories and stuff, they're so good that there's no chance they wouldn't succeed, in my view. But if you're just really good, then there's a certain element of luck to it. But if you stretch it out over years and years or decades, then luck is much less relevant. If you're extremely unlucky, maybe then you still won't make it in any field. It doesn't have to be YouTube. It applies in general. We make our own luck in the long term. But there's plenty of short-term fluctuation and chaos. You have to learn to live with that and even enjoy it, because it does make life interesting. Question to file 1568. When night turns to day without warning, so that your drink still had fresh ice is definitely the key detail. If you did time warp, then you had the drink with you and it came with you. What you're holding comes along, but it had to be a wide enough area to encompass your friend as well, but then not encompass the bartender or anyone else in the area. It is seemingly attuned specifically for you and your friend. Why? Who cared about you and your friend? Not that you don't matter in a general sense, just why you, right? That is a question that probably entered your mind. Space-time portals don't seem random, is all I'm getting from this. The more and more stories I hear and read about this is that space-time portals are not random, or at least most of the time are not. Something wanted you to be involved in one. Case on file 1569. The elusive watermelon. So yeah, indeed, inflation is going wild. I remember 2 years ago, when I first moved to North Carolina, a pack of 24 cans of Dr. Pepper was about $8 at Walmart. Now it's $13. We're talking about every 3 years, prices are doubling. This isn't sustainable. How is anyone affording anything? I mean, it's a struggle for me, and I'm sure it's a struggle for a lot of other people. But that is exactly what happens when you create trillions of dollars out of thin air and inject it into the economy, as happened during the COVID mania. Mania is probably the best word for it. If you think it was necessary or not, well, these are the consequences that follow, and I don't think a lot of people are considering all the consequences. Now we kind of have to suffer them, sadly. And then to top it all off, the universe goes and steals your watermelon when you're already struggling. That's just unfair. The universe has no chill. Case on file 1570. The sub that defied reality. Less boring, huh? Be careful what you wish for, Bonita. It won't always be mysterious sandwiches that appear and replace a different one. I mean, that's not a bad switcheroo going on. Also, your oldest daughter sounds like me when I was a kid, where I just wanted to eat meat and bread. I didn't want to have vegetables at all. Trying to get me to eat a vegetable was quite the challenge. Of course, now I mostly just eat vegetables, so times change. Now time for the joke of the day. I'm not a fan of elevator music. It's bad on so many levels. You get it? Different floors, different levels. Yes, and also holding music when you have to be on the phone with the bank or something. It's terrible. Come on, do better. Case on file 1571. A quirky twist. The baffling badminton incident. So if no one was looking at the shuttle while it was far up in the air from a powerful thrust, then I suppose it must have de-rendered. But the catalyst isn't explained. Why did it de-render? Which is very uncommon for things to do, in the grand scheme of things. And then re-render 45 minutes later. Why exactly at that moment? Did someone choose it? I mean, that's really the question, isn't it? Is this all complete chaos and randomness, or did some will choose this? What is more scary? I don't know. Case on file 1572. The Boy from Dreams and France. I just get chills when reading stories about predicting the future, especially in dream format. Though yes, it's often in ways that don't provide context. So there was one story where the man was tumbling over in a field, the colors were muted, people were running at him weirdly, but it turns out the field was just rough to run on, and the people running towards him, they were trying to help him, but they sounded weird because they were running and grunting and all that. But there was no malicious intent. Often I think our minds are subconscious, kind of infuse malicious intent or negativity into our perception of the future, or it could just be random nightmares, even if they're not trying to tell you the future. Sadly, a lot of people tend to be stuck in that rut of negativity. Do you typically have nightmares? I'm lucky. I almost never have nightmares. I do have strange dreams sometimes, if I remember them, which is rare. I think I had one nightmare in my whole life, at least that I remember. So I'm very lucky in that regard. Okay, so for the bonus file. When spirits speak across generations. So perhaps when you die and all other copies of you in all other multiverse universes are exhausted, they're all dead too. Then you're on your last life and you lose that life. Maybe then you enter into the ethereal spiritual realm. Like a ghost, I suppose. And in that place, reality isn't exactly linear. And there Grandpa was. Part of him anyways. Trying to pass on a message from, let's say, a fellow traveler. And really, isn't that what we'd all want? If we died, we were on our last life, and we were really passing on to whatever's next. Wouldn't the first and only thing you really want to do in this mortal coil is make sure that people who cared about you know you're still around in some form? I think that gives closure to a certain extent. Yeah, that's what I would want to do. And play pranks if I was stuck here. That's what I would do for fun. What else are you going to do? Now time for the joke of the day. A man tells his wife he will be working from home today. Maybe on our lunch break we could have a quickie. It's pronounced quiche. Wasn't talking about food. Oh my, that's a naughty one. Case notes for file 1573. The 25-year psychic bond. Psychic bonds, like Bluetooth for our minds. But very similar to Bluetooth, the connection can be wonky, unstable, it can waver, and even when seemingly connected properly, the connection doesn't always feed information accurately. Sometimes the information is garbled, or not interpreted by the device correctly. In this case, the device being our brain. But future predictions and dreams are a bigger beast to deal with, in terms of explaining what's going on. Especially when those future predictions affect the timeline that you're in, the one that you actually experience. This goes even beyond replay theory, where the idea is, we already made our choices, and now we're just experiencing a kind of movie of what we did, or a replay in a video game where you see your actions and what you did and what everyone else did. But yeah, this is a step ahead of that. It's almost like your dreams are an editor for the replay or the movie. You're able to go into the movie when you're dreaming and splice out certain parts or alter them, edit them in certain formats. Now, it's not like a direct interface with a computer where I'm editing videos. It's not exactly like that, but it is similar, an allegory to that. This is true power over reality, and it is truly awe-inspiring, even if you don't have direct control over it. Case notes for file 1574. The voice that controls Tony. So first off, your job sounds awesome. Being able to be paid to walk around all day around town, I mean, that's just awesome. Nice. But the most important question to ask here is the sound that you heard over the PA system that apparently Tony didn't hear. And I'm guessing if anyone else was in the shop, no one else heard it either. It's like the philosophical question of, does a tree make a sound if it falls in the forest and no one is around to hear it? Well, on a purely physical sense, what is sound? Sound is just organized vibrations in the atmosphere, or any medium, doesn't have to be through air. So in that sense, yes, it does make a sound. But in the metaphysical sense, a sound is contingent on being heard, on being observed, processed by a conscious mind. So in that regard, I think it was real, but I think it was a sound that you weren't meant to pick up on. I don't think you were meant to hear it. Get into character, Tony. You're on the clock now. It's a real Truman Show vibes there. I'm just waiting for Tony to bust out the product placement randomly and stare into a specific direction where apparently there are no cameras, but I guess there are cameras. Boy, that'd be really creepy. Now time for the quote of the day. Great part of being a grown-up, you never have to do anything. Peter Blake. Yeah, you never have to do anything technically, and you also can do anything you want. Isn't that the point of why it's so overwhelming for so many people? If you think back to when you're a kid, mostly your days are free, but they're also planned for the important stuff, right? And in that kind of environment, it's this weird juxtaposition where sometimes you feel more free the less options you have. The more options you have, the more constrained by the overwhelming abundance of choice, and you feel like you're trapped. You see this all the time when you're trying to pick a show to watch when you're having an evening meal, which is something I do, a ritual where you make your food, you sit it down, and then you feel, okay, what am I going to watch? And by the time you find something, the food is already cold. It's a real problem. To counter that, you should pick the movie before you make the food. But I digress. The overabundance of choice and the freedom to do anything you want, well, It's perfectly normal if you feel like that is overwhelming. You're not alone. Case notes of file 1575. Secrets of the Heart. Okay, if enough thought is given on a specific type of object, or even a very specific unique object, can our souls act as a sort of cosmic black hole, sucking in that object near us, pulling it in through our sheer will and focus, even if it's subconscious? And in that way, maybe through various acts of dominoes tumbling, your theory is correct. It was a rat that had a nest with a necklace in it, or maybe the rat just was influenced to go and find a necklace like that, then brought it back. This could have started right away as soon as you started to see the necklace in Twin Peaks. I don't remember what episode it first makes an appearance. I think it's the first one, actually. So that would lend more credence to this. So the rat is influenced to go and find this necklace, then brought it into view where it would cross your path, and then pull it away. Maybe your subconscious mind wanted this experience. It wanted to experience something that just made no sense. It was a grand mystery, at least grand in your life. Now, maybe it wasn't a rat, maybe it was the universe itself, but one way or another, it is very clear that your will, your thought process focused on this necklace is what made it appear. It is just too random, too great a coincidence for it to be random, in my view. And also, yes, Twin Peaks is great, watch it. It is quite old, but it has that vibe that can only be described as classic, in a different time, pure and true. You owe it to yourself to watch it. Case notes, file 1576. Flames in the Rain. So I think it's safe to say the CIA is not involved, unless they're the ones responsible for multiverse sight and travel. Which, hey, I guess I wouldn't put it past them, but that would be a bit of a stretch. It's an accident that's lost to the multiverse rivers. You'll never find it because the river timeline you're on, even through a single day of travel, has so many branching paths that you've traveled on without realizing it, that finding your way back is simply impossible. It would be like trying to find the exact spot in the universe where you were a day ago. And I mean, in the physical universe, the planet is traveling through it. The planet's orbiting the sun, which is traveling around the galaxy is moving towards Andromeda, and so on and so forth. The exact X, Y, Z coordinates, 3D spatial coordinates of space-time where you were a day ago, you can never find that again. It is impossible, even though those coordinates do exist, you just can't ever find it. There's no compass to guide you back. Now time for the quote of the day. Never judge a book by its movie. J.W. Egan. Yep. So hard to translate a book into a movie. A simple theory is that a book has so many intricate details because you can add so much to a book. Hundreds or thousands of pages, and often there's multiple series. And given that, well, yeah, of course it's hard to translate a book of that size with so much information to a 2 or 3 hour spectacle, which the spectacle is more designed to captivate you. So it's all the good bits, but if you don't have the context, those bits might not make sense or pay off. Now I think when you have multiple parts to a movie, like Lord of the Rings, the trilogy, okay, that is a fantastic adaptation. Also the Harry Potter series, pretty good. There are some things they changed that I don't like the Death Eaters being able to fly. I like the detail that it was only Voldemort and Snape that could fly. But I digress, that's not too important. Overall, they're good series. But generally, standalone movie adaptations don't do quite well for me. Although TV show book adaptations are pretty good. The Expanse for one. And more recently, Three Body Problem on Netflix. The movie can still be good for a general audience that has never read the source material. Maybe that's the whole goal. Anyway, that was really long-winded. I'll leave it on Watch The Expanse. Amazing show. Case notes, file 1577. A surreal encounter in sunlight and silence. Don't know, so it's aliens. Could go on my tombstone. Or I could just adopt it as a life motto. But I guess I would amend it to say, don't know, so I hope it's aliens. Because often I don't actually think it is aliens, even though I want it to be. But I really want it to be. But to be able to mess with the human mind to this extent, who knows, maybe it really is aliens. I could see that. In this case. I don't think it's multiverse theory, you traveled to a different universe or saw it, because this one, it's just too different. The universe where you're in a playground and then you're just in a house with a person that knows you, and that so told you to go back into the playground, no, there's no way. That would be really weird. That'd be like you're in the Matrix system itself in a different universe. No, it's not that. It feels more like a test than a glitch. It's like something was interfacing with your mind and knew that, and it was deliberate. Also, the three-body problem on Netflix, a new show, it's quite the watch, and I think it tethers a bit into this, where I don't want to spoil anything. I'll just say that in short, can we be certain that we can trust our own senses? That nothing is able to mess with the synapses firing in our brain in a certain way to produce a specific pattern that we see? That's a question. Makes you wonder, maybe all the glitches we're experiencing are deliberate to make us think that the universe is unstable when it's not. Probably I don't really think that, but it is an interesting idea. Extremely terrifying, but interesting. Case also file 1578. The car that merged from thin air. Stories like this one remind me how often life seems to be like a D&D campaign, Dungeons & Dragons. The core difference is we're not aware we're playing, and we don't know who the dungeon master is. What if it's our friends in the real world? I keep thinking lately, what if at the last life we have, after exhausting all quantum immortality copies, then we finally die for real, but we just reawaken, open up the pod, the VR pod in the real world, and our friends are there in that real world, and our memories return or just weren't suppressed because we're conscious in that real world. It literally is just the Matrix, with the exception that there aren't killer robots that control us and have us in pods. No, it's just our friends, and maybe all of our lives are taking place in the blink of an eye, a summer afternoon. And then we just open the pod, we die first, open the pod, then go back to work or something. Go back to our wife and kids there. What is so cool is this thought is not at all impossible. In fact, it's kind of likely. And if true, then our experiences here, our challenges, they matter. They were intended for us. Partly by us, we wanted to experience something challenging, and by the dungeon master, our friends or maybe an employee that works in the company that's hosting these advanced VR pods. So we go there, we sign up because we wanted a new experience. Something novel, where there isn't any real risk. We just don't know because that memory of reality is suppressed. Now, of course, this could all be wrong. Maybe this is just the only reality. But damn, it's fun to think about. But specific to this glitch of a car that just appears from nowhere but then vanishes again, that's the key. I don't think it's multiverse side because you both acted like you were physically there. It wasn't just some ethereal sight of a soul. No, the whole car was there for the both of you. This other mystery car reacted directly to you and your presence, both in line of sight and both fully materialized. There's of course space-time portals, which are so common when driving, but that doesn't really fit. Even if the portal was a while away, so this mystery car took it, then appeared right next to you, in the moment you went to merge lanes, okay, that is plausible, but then how did it vanish? Because then you were in the same lane, neither merged, and then he vanished. Then you were still in the same vector direction, you would have crossed the space-time portal first. So you would be the one to vanish, not the other car, if there were two portals that were in such close proximity. So I don't think it could be that either. This one is quite hard to place. Now time for the quote of the day. If knowledge can create problems, it is not through ignorance that we can solve them. Isaac Asimov. It's a funny circle of life where we have problems, so we delve deep into our minds and analyze reality to determine a course of action that is predictable to solve the problem. The only problem is, by analyzing the universe, we discover new mysteries and new problems. So we keep digging to solve those problems, and then we create 100 new ones, and then we have to keep digging to solve those ones. And I don't know if there's an end to this. It may go on for infinity, which is exciting, but it really does make you wonder, is there a limit to the mysteries of the universe? It's fun to be along the ride with you to discover what we can. Case also file 1579. The Vanishing Dumpster Divers. I like where your fiance's head was going. Guardian angels are a pretty good idea, but I don't think they really fit in this case. When guardian angels inhabit a real material person, they still obey the laws of physics to a certain extent. For instance, if they had super speed and they zipped over to you in the fraction of a second it would take to save your life from, banging your head on the door, that level of speed would create a sonic boom, and the G-forces would have ripped the body apart. So the guardian angel may have survived in the spirit form, but the body would have been destroyed. And I don't think guardian angels are supposed to do that. And of course, you would have experienced it The sonic boom most notably, and the completely eviscerated body. I think your original thought that it was quantum immortality, not knowing the word, just a different universe, you probably did die from slipping, banging your head, and now you're in a new universe, and in this one, those dumpster divers weren't here. They may have been in a different dumpster, just a block away. Of course, just look out for other differences in your universe. If you find more anomalies, you'll know that your soul went for a hop and a skip. Case notes of file 1580. The gym anomaly. Is this also a case of quantum immortality? People do sadly die in the gym a bit more frequently than in the general populace because you're straining so extremely hard in the gym. It's not that surprising. Blood pressure spikes, cardiovascular activity increases, the heart rate skyrockets. Now, these are good things in general, but if you have an ailment, then doing these kinds of strenuous physical activities can cause it to burst in that singular moment. But it wouldn't explain everything, because you had the combination to the locker that wasn't yours in the new universe. But why would that combination match? It makes sense that you didn't know the combination for the locker that was yours in the new universe, but why would you know the one that wasn't yours? Why would it be the same? Because it was a different person that set it up for locker number 12. But it is technically possible that it was just a coincidence. In this new universe, the person that did take locker 12 had the same combination as yours. I think it's probably 4 digits. I don't know if you mentioned how many digits it was. If it's 4 digits, then I think it's like 10,000 possible combination differences. So that's a lot, but it's not so much that it is completely out of the realm of possibility. And now time for the joke of the day. I excel at sleeping. In fact, I can do it with my eyes closed. Case notes of file 1581. Frozen time in a mysterious carnival. This brings me back to a story over a year ago, maybe 2 years ago. Year and a half, something like that. There was this man that was in a restaurant. I think he was proposing to his wife, but maybe not. I know he was in a restaurant, 100%. And time just slowed down. There was no rhyme or reason to it. Everything else around him slowed down. His partner, I know he was with someone else, and the waiters, the waitresses, the other patrons, everyone slowed down. Very, very slowly. The key difference in this story, though, is all the people that were looking at you in terror, like you didn't belong. It was like you're seeing behind the curtains in a way that you were not supposed to. And damn, is that freaking eerie. There's stories like this where you just like feel it in the pit of your stomach. Ooh, not right. Something's not right. Case notes for file 1582. From music into her necklace. I think we're all in that camp that we love DOP stories. It's the most classic glitch style that exists, in my opinion. Just common, but still very interesting. It's the bread and butter of glitch in the Matrix stories. For a good reason. You can fill up on it, and it's quite tasty. You don't have to go to these exotic dishes like time freezes or space-time portals or aliens. Stuff like that is more extreme, caviar and other dishes that maybe you don't have to have, although they have their place. But the bread and butter goes to another level when the item returns to you. And especially in the case where it returns to you in a place that is impossible that it could have been even a day prior, because you always use the fan. And as you tested, if you use the fan, then the centrifugal force pushes the necklace away. So if it was there, it would have fallen off. So it literally just was placed there within a day. Who did it? Maybe we'll never know. Maybe it's just the universe being funny, or the dungeon master of your campaign. Case notes of file 1583. The cursed mirror. A person from a long time ago. As you mentioned, the mirrors were very old, as is a soul that is trapped or infused into that mirror. But cursed object I don't think is quite right. It doesn't really express what we mean, because it's like in fiction where you have a cursed object, you touch it and your hand turns black or you die, or stuff like that. It's not really that way. Cursed object, in this case, just means a object that has a soul infused to it, and that soul is a negative energy. Nothing happens if you touch the object, but if you're around it, then there can be negative effects, let's say, because the soul is unpleasant to be around. So the soul can bring misfortune just from being near it, if it's a negative spirit in this case. Malicious indeed. A dead squirrel in the room is very morbid. But the more disconcerting aspect to this is, how did the spirit know that you had pet squirrels in the past? Can spirits read our minds or our memories? Boy, is that a disturbing thought. To lighten the mood, now time for the joke of the day. What happened to the archaeologist who lost her job? Her career was in ruins. Yeah, I guess she's still there. I mean, doesn't matter if you lost your job or not, it's your passion, so keep exploring those ruins. Dig away. Get that little brush that moves sand away from artifacts delicately. Those are neat to use. Case notes for file 1584. The delicious mystery at Tacos El Gordo. Coincidences permeate through every single facet of our lives. Every single day, something miraculous and incredibly unlikely happens. We just don't notice most of them because they don't directly impact us. Or if they do, we just don't appreciate the sheer odds of it. Indeed, just being born is a tremendous luck of happenstance. Why was your sperm exactly the one that managed to reach the egg, right? Out of millions or billions. But of the coincidences that do impact us, are they all planned out by some external force? Some grand cosmic web that has every single possibility mapped out, and your exact path through that web mapped out as well? Well, I personally don't think so. I'm not a fate kind of guy. But influenced, yes. Guardian angels, aliens, CIA, government, the dungeon masters of the simulation, whatever you want to call it, there are so many possible influences of a higher level that could be trying to manipulate where we end up. I do believe that is true. I just don't believe they have perfect control over the future. There's no way to know who has a hand in tossing proverbial pebbles on our road, and we may never know to just what extent our lives are influenced. Case also file 1585. The ice cube beyond the multiverse. So that ice cube tray actually pushes away quantum immortality as a viable explanation. Because why would there be a cube missing in the tray of the new universe if you never used one? I mean, maybe you used one earlier in that day? But that seems a bit of a stretch. I guess it's not impossible. But that momentary blackout, where things just go black for half a second, that reminds me of when people describe the sun blinking out of existence, but it's only for half a second to a second in those cases as well. And it's only for a small geographic area, so it doesn't affect the entire planet. What this makes me think is, this isn't quantum immortality. It's another demonstration of server cluster failure. That's what is actually happening when people see the sun going out. It gives tremendous credence to the idea that we live in a simulation. And in that real world, there are still computers of a certain type and server clusters like we use here. If you're playing a MMORPG online or any service online, there's various server clusters that are charged with handling the logic of the program and also the traffic to the server. And if one of those clusters crashes, well, there's others in a cloud, so to speak, that will take over. But that process still takes some time. Even though it's very fast, it's not so fast that it's instantaneous to our perception. We perceive it as sound and light going out for half a second to a second in a geographic area. How big is a server cluster managing in terms of the virtual real world that we inhabit here? A square mile, 10 square miles? Who knows? But in that volume of area, anyone within it will perceive light and sound just vanishing, even if they're indoors. It's not the sun, it's any sort of input coming in. And really, when you think about it, this is as classic a glitch as a glitch can be. It's literally just an error in the server managing the simulation. Pretty cool. Now time for the quote of the day. If the human mind was simple enough to understand, we'd be too simple to understand it. Emerson Puck. Well, when you appreciate just how powerful the human mind is, and how there's 8 billion of them walking around, that's amazing. There's 8 billion computers out there trying to understand the nature of reality. Our minds are not easy to understand, because they're so complex. But if they were simpler, they wouldn't have the processing power to understand that simplicity either. So I think there's a tipping point where you're complex enough eventually to understand yourself, your own makeup. It's like the test for animals. Can they perceive themselves in a mirror? It's the mirror test. I think dolphins and elephants do pass, but chickens, dogs generally don't, cats don't. They just think it's another reality that they can't access, not themselves. I think pigs can pass the test as well. Pigs are actually quite smart. But anyways, I think suffice to say, appreciate the gift you have, your own mind, and the ability to perceive reality, whatever it might ultimately be deep down. Case notes for file 1586, Facing the Unthinkable. So in a sense, facing your demons is something that every person eventually has to come to terms with. But facing them in a literal sense of demonic possession, that's another level entirely. And I'm trying to contemplate how I would personally react in a situation like this, where you black out for an hour, you think you just fainted or went to bed, but no, in reality you were possessed for that entire hour. You like to think that you're pure or strong and you could resist that kind of possession, whatever it might be. Maybe you can't. I mean, you won't know until it happens to you, if it ever does, and I hope it never does happen to any of us, for sure. But it's natural to want to believe that you'd be strong enough to resist that. Maybe most people wouldn't, and it's not really their fault. How would you react after the fact, especially if the demon possessing you did something horrific? What about all the people in prison for murder or something like that? Are there a lot of people in there that shouldn't be because it wasn't really them, they were possessed? Well, I guess it's hard to say, because if that did happen to you, would you go around telling people, telling the court and the judges and the lawyers that, no, I was just possessed? Well, maybe if you're trying to cop a insanity plea, but if it really did happen, at least to your perception, I don't know. Maybe if someone took a video of you crawling on the ceiling, that would give some credence, but I don't think we have any of those videos going around that are legitimate. Although then you have to ask, was a demonic possession purely limited to an hour, or was your soul able to eventually reject it? Maybe initially it couldn't, but after an hour or so, it was able to push it out. So that's a half and half answer. You couldn't fully reject it, but you did eventually. Or is there just a limit to how long a demon can possess us for? Caissons of Foul, 1587. The day the woods came alive. When reality is described as being muted, the sounds and visuals of the world are dampened. That is, I think, when you know that you're in a dead pocket server. That and also no other human beings around, or any animal life at all. Even the wind is slowed down. Now in these dead pocket servers, I think at any given time, there's maybe a few hundred, maybe a few thousand people in totality. If everyone that dies goes to the same buffer world, so to speak, maybe there's different ones, but if there's just a singular one where everyone goes, then in the entire scope of the planet, there's a few hundred to 1,000 people. So that is nothing. You'll never meet someone, almost certainly never meet someone else. But maybe you will. Maybe this was another person trapped, and maybe you perceive them almost as blending into the environment. The other possibility is this was some sort of game master in charge of facilitating the transfer, observing you, making sure nothing bad happens to you along the process. Because maybe if you die there in the pocket universe, your own data is corrupted or something along those lines. This is total speculation, but I guess it kind of fits. And now time for the quote of the day. Well, if crime fighters fight crime and firefighters fight fire, what do freedom fighters fight? They never mention that part to us, do they? George Carlin. The thing we declare war on, or the thing we say we're fighting for, is typically what we're fighting against. Branding is so important for the normal person. It's the same thing as the Patriot Act for bills passed in the US or most places. To fool the public, they need a proper sounding title. And total destruction of your right to privacy and due process is not a very good catchy sounding title, is it? But Patriot Act, now that sure is. So always be wary of the title of anything you're reading. If it's fiction, if it's an article, if it's a bill in Congress, if it's what a group calls themselves, always dig deeper beneath the surface, because that's where the truth is. Case notes of File 1588. The human loop. A time and a place. Both are interconnected. They are woven of the same fabric and bound together. But you can travel through one or the other. At rest default state, for any human alive now, we're traveling almost 99.99% through time. Very little through space. And the faster you go through space, then the less you're traveling through time. They're an inverse relation, like a scale that's balanced. The more pressure you put on one, the more the other rises up. Now, there is a way to cheat and not accelerate through time or space, and that is through space-time portals, which are probably just wormholes, and in this case, artificial is my guess. And they can send you down the river of time, if that is calibrated for time instead of space. In this case, that's what I think happened. You went down the river of time in the past for just a few minutes, and I think if you had a watch or your phone on you before, and you looked at the time before and after, you'd notice a few minutes would be out of sync. But then the question is, are you still in the same universe? When you traverse through these space-time portals, in time to the past, there is a theory in time travel, if you're going to the past, that then you occupy a new universe in that past, because otherwise you get paradoxes. But if not, if you're in the same universe, that plays host to quite a few troubling thoughts. The most prominent one is for the man that walked with his dog. Did he see you twice? So the first time, as you're exiting the forest, for you it's the second time you're seeing the man, and for him it's the first time. And then inside the forest, it would be the second time, and for you it would be the first time. I wonder if he looked confused at all. He probably wouldn't say anything anyways, like you wouldn't say anything to him. Most likely though, to preserve against paradoxes, you are now in a new universe. It is a way to go to a different universe outside of quantum immortality, space-time portals. If you go to the past, I don't think it's necessary if you go to the future or you just travel through space itself. Case notes or file 1589, Bedsheet Blues. So the initial fragment of polish that you found, it went missing after you found the real one in the future, which makes you question, was that fragment ever real at all? Was it simply a product of your subconscious, trying to relay future information that it received in a format you would know? It knew what was going to happen and it just showed you beforehand. Now why your subconscious would choose this? Or maybe it was some other entity that rammed it through, almost like loading a program onto a computer and executing. If it was someone else, why? Why would it matter if you knew this ahead of time? I don't have an answer to that one, but it is disconcerting, no matter the answer. Case notes are file 1590, The Predestined Path to Love. Adjustment Bureau indeed. Again, guardian angels, classic angels, aliens, dungeon masters. Who knows how many people are out there influencing us, or people, entities, or our own governments too. There are just so many forces that could be out there responsible for influencing, pushing, manipulating, strategizing our own lives for us. I don't like that at all. Almost makes me angry to think about. But I do think it's true, at least for some people. Maybe not every single person on the planet, 8 billion people, that's a lot of people to manage, but for some maybe key players, they're trying to direct them in a certain path, for some outcome that we can't even hope to understand. Ultimately though, I like to think that we do have the ultimate say. We have free will. So if we choose something, it's our choice. But if you're confined down a certain road, a certain path that was pre-made for you, and even if there's a fork in the road, that is organized for you, constructed for you, and every path leads back to the same thing. It curves and twists back to contort to where you're supposed to go. I think the only way to beat it is to go off the path. Do things you wouldn't normally do. Break the mold. If you want to taste real freedom. And there's actually a theme in this in Final Fantasy VII, the remake of the game. Towards the end of it, you're met with these spirits, these entities of magic and destiny, they call it, and they don't want you to break free. You have to fight against it, rage against it. And then if you manage it, well, Aerith, one of the characters, asks a very specific question, and that is, are you ready? Because now you're going to embrace real freedom. There's total chaos out there. Nothing is there to protect you. It's only you. So are you ready? Now time for the quote of the day. If you limit your choices only to what seems possible or reasonable, you disconnect yourself from what you truly want, and all that is left is a compromise. Robert Fritz. Well, speaking about real freedom and being influenced, yeah, all of society, just in a general sense, not speaking of aliens or the CIA or anything, is trying to influence you down a certain path. Are you going to let it? Try to analyze the possible futures that path could lead to. Make sure it's something you really want, not just something you're doing because it's expected of you. Case notes of file 1591. The hidden grid of reality. So I've mentioned this before, but I have a condition called visual snow. And if you don't know what that is, it's a condition where for all of my existence, 24/7, even when I close my eyes, or actually no, when I sleep, in my dreams I don't see it. But anytime I'm conscious, so 16/7 I guess, I see this persistent field of static. The best analogy is to a TV screen with static on it, one of those old TV screens if you remember. Only the dots are much smaller, but they still have the same erratic fluctuation, like they're popping in and out, but they're so tiny. You can almost ignore it, you certainly get used to it, even though it is somewhat annoying. But it's basically an oscillating filter of static in front of my vision forever. It's not enough to block my vision, especially in bright areas. But outside at night or indoors if there's not much light, then it's all I see, really. So then there are stories like this, where people are seeing a grid. Sometimes in the sky, sometimes on walls. And it makes me wonder, is this visual snow that apparently 2% of people have, seeing the fundamental nature of reality? At the base layer, there's just the quantum foam, this oscillating sea, this ocean of virtual particles that pop into existence and then cancel each other out. Is that what I'm seeing? Maybe it is just the overactive part of my visual processing center in my brain. I also have tinnitus, which is just hearing a ringing. It's not very loud, but it's still annoying if things are very quiet. Basically, my base layer for processing visuals and sound is always active, when it shouldn't be. If there's nothing coming in, I'm still hearing and seeing stuff. Am I hearing and seeing stuff that is baseline in the universe, or is it just my brain being wonky? Who knows? Case also file 1592. My aunt's unnatural smile. Yeah, so creepy old ladies is a trope in horror stories, and for a good reason. It is terrifying. You know, the grandma in the forest offering cookies, and really she means ill intent. To have anything similar manifest in real life, I can't imagine it. I mean, I know my own grandma, sadly passed now. If she behaved in a way that was creepy, offsetting, it would stick with me, and I would never forget it. Even if she did vanish later on, you still ask yourself questions about it. Case also file 1593. The cart swap conundrum. I don't think I can explain this one. Even if we adopt the idea that it really was just a prank by your dad, it doesn't explain how he was able to remove your hand that was always firmly grasping the cart, and then place it on this stranger's cart. And why wouldn't they be laughing if it was a prank? They would be in on it too. And how would your dad organize it without talking to the people? Scribble notes or something to them? Doesn't seem possible. Of course, none of this seems possible. It's just a true glitch. It's almost like you hit a space-time portal and it brought you to the cart with them, but they would see you pop in. Your dad would have seen you just pop out instantly. No way. This is a true glitch, which I have no explanation for. Now time for the joke of the day. I told my girlfriend she drew her eyebrows too high. She seemed surprised. There's a joke about this in Seinfeld. I think it's Jerry's nephew or uncle. No, it's his uncle, I think. He loses his eyebrows, so then he draws them on, and he perpetually looks surprised. It's really funny in the sitcom. I think it wasn't him. I think someone else drew them on or something like that. It's a really funny episode. Case also file 1594. A terrifying Icelandic roadside mystery. So I just want to say, I commend you for going back, even though you were terrified. Because of all the supernatural stuff and glitches that I cover, demons and spirits and all that, human beings are the source of the purest evil we can imagine. Now it's a small subset of people, to be clear, but they're capable of such malice. But you never know what kind of evil lurks in the hearts of man. So certainly I hope she wasn't kidnapped and running away or something like that. Now, if that was the case, don't blame yourself. It's not your fault. It's whoever is responsible for doing that. I'm going to end there on saying I don't think that's the case, and we'll just chalk it up to a temporary fracture in the multiverse. Yeah. Case also file 1595. Smiles, surprises, and shifting reality. Yeah, indeed, it's the Mandela effect, but what causes it? I think there's a simple explanation. When you cross to a new universe, things are different. And you remember things that are small, usually, that are different. Like, I remember Fruit Loops being Fruit, not Froot. Maybe that's a Mandela effect, or maybe it's just my kid memory. Although I did eat it as a teenager quite a bit. In fact, I still eat Fruit Loops sometimes. Don't judge me. Delicious. It is basic glitch in the matrix crap, indeed. Although I think it's gold, but hey, to each their own. Case also file 1596. Solstice Serendipity. It's a dream you had with that eye, the giant eye, the all-seeing eye that is even on our money. Of course, signifying knowledge of the universe and the gateway to the soul. And then it turns out that your subconscious was giving you signs of the future to come. Indeed, knowledge. Of love to play out. Of course, then you ask yourself the same thing that Neo was asked in The Matrix. Would you still have broken the vase if the Oracle hadn't told Neo it's okay that you broke it? Did that influence him to move and then break it? Probably. Anything that happens to us changes us to some extent. So I think seeing this future changed your future. In a certain sense, even though I don't like fate, I think you're meant to be with her. And you needed this subconscious push to guide you there. The choices you made were not the same as if you had not seen this dream. And indeed, they guided you to the literal woman of your dreams. That is kind of cool, I won't lie. Oh, and by the way, eating nerds candy? What a blast from the past. I used to eat that all the time. Skittles too. And Starburst. Ooh, I kind of want candy now. Damn. Now time for the joke of the day. Why did the financial manager quit his job? He was losing interest. Yeah, those customers were not happy. Case note for file 1597. The sunglasses coded into reality. So this has to be a duplicate pair that was just stolen from a neighboring multiverse universe. Down the river as it goes and back again. But of course you have to ask, why a pair of sunglasses? It's so specific. I think it just relates to our own mind. If we focus on an object enough, then if some item doesn't transfer over from a different universe, it'll be what we focused on, not something entirely random. Or it's just a chaotic good sheriff. Kinda weird on that note, but hey, who knows? Caisson sur file 1598. PS3, VHS tape, and a large rat. So 2 instances of you with impossible video or image ending up in places that they just couldn't have. And in my mind, that means there is some will involved, some entity out there that was messing with you, pranking you, or maybe it was as your grandmother was talking to a male voice. Maybe it was your grandfather trying to connect with you in the only way he could. I suppose it's a wholesome spin on it, and I'll take it. Now time for the quote of the day. They wouldn't call it falling in love if you didn't get hurt sometimes, but you just pick yourself up and move on. Gregory Thomas Garcia, Elia Aaron, and Jordan Young. Without being vulnerable to pain, then you're not open enough to love someone else. So yeah, there's that risk element to it, and all things in life that are good have risk to them. I don't see any way around that. If you want love, you have to be willing to accept the fact that you might get hurt. Are you willing to accept that? I am. Caisson sur file 1599. The Shaded Death. So to explain away the deer that seemed to decompose for 6 months in a couple days, the only thing I can think of is some sort of time portal, a space-time portal focused on time. Instead of it being a crossing event like a wormhole, it seemed like it infused and surrounded the deer persistently, for at least for a few days. But while that sort of explains the deer, even though it's different than how space-time portals normally work, it doesn't explain the sunglasses or the shoe decoration. I have no explanation for those two. Caisson sur file 1600. The Light of Glitches. I think this is a simple case of a prior inhabitant preferring the bright overhead light. Whoever lived there before passed away and is still around. Or it's multiverse side, so your husband just saw you in a different universe that did indeed use that light and left the room, and all that good stuff. Simple, yet extraordinary. Now time for the quote of the day. There's an evolutionary imperative why we give a crap about our family and friends. There's an evolutionary imperative why we don't give a crap about anybody else. If we loved all people indiscriminately, we couldn't function. David Foster. I think this quote is 100% true, yet part of it we have to actively fight against, even though it isn't in our nature, because I do think we should care to some extent about everyone else. Now it's that mental test of, would you feel worse if 1 million people from a country you've never been to and never will go to died from some tragic weather event or something? Or if your own parents died, or your kids or your wife? If I'm being honest, I would feel worse if a single person that I truly love died than 1 million people I don't even know. There is something, I suppose, dark about that, but it is true, and I think we have to acknowledge that, at least for most people. But the key is, even though you can't quite care as much as your own close friends and family, you should still care to some extent. If those 1 million deaths have no impact on you at all, that's a problem. So we have to push through into not caring at all about other people that aren't close to us. and at least care a little bit. Just a little bit. That's enough. Like the video, subscribe, hit the bell. Kinetic Symphony signing off.